Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is John Smith. I'm with the Court School. Good afternoon, Your Honor. I'm McCarthy, appearing on behalf of the Commission.
Turning the jury. Please rise for the jury. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank you for what you've done over the last several days. I mean, this was kind of a long process. The jury selection itself was kind of a grueling thing. I know you've had to pay hard attention to what's been going on in the court. I know that you have. And so I'd like to thank you. I know Mr. McCarthy would like to do the same thing and will, and the defendant as well. But you perform a very important duty when you come here and you do this. So thank you. Now, you've heard the evidence in the case, and nothing that I say, nothing that Mr. McCarthy says now is going to be evidence. And if I recount something to you differently than the way you remember it, then I urge you to go with what you remember. Just like I'm going to talk about the law a little bit in just a second, because I'm going to tell you what I have to prove. But I want to remind you that in the end, Judge Kumar is the boss of that. And if I say something that contradicts what she says, you have to go with her. But I think that I do know something about what the judge is going to tell you as far as what the law is. One of the things that the court told you at the very beginning of this case is that every crime is composed of elements or ingredients. And in order for me to prove that Mr. Young is guilty of these various crimes, I have to prove each of the elements of each of the crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's all I have to do. And I told you that there are things that I don't have to prove. And that's, you don't have to decide. Things like whether or not this is a good man or a bad man. That's not the issue. I don't have to prove a motive to you, but I think that I will. Let's talk, first of all, about a concept that we talked about at the very beginning of the trial, and that's this, aiding and abetting. Now, I told you that if you help somebody commit a crime, the law in Michigan is that you help somebody commit a crime if the crime was committed and you assist before or during the crime. Before or during the crime. And either you intend for the crime to be committed yourself, or you know that the person that you are giving assistance to intends for the crime to be committed. If you do that, you are just as guilty as though you committed the crime yourself. That's the law. And that's what the court's going to tell you. That's called aiding and abetting. And in all of these counts we've charged on Mr. Young, he's charged as the principal, the person that actually did it, or an aider and abetter. And you'll hear the language that the judge gives you when we go through this. Now, each of these crimes we have charged with first-degree premeditated murder, first-degree felony murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to commit murder, and 1 count of armed robbery. I just want to go through with you for a second. Now let's talk about first-degree premeditated murder for a second. Those are their elements. In this count, the first element is the defendant caused the death of the victim. In this case, it's Mr. Bob Cipriano. We'll talk about that in just a second. The second element is that at the time he committed that act that caused it, or at the time he aided and abetted in somebody else who caused the death of Mr. Cipriano, he must have had the intent to kill. The intent to kill. Or the person he aided had the intent to kill, and he knew when he was helping that was the case. That's the second element. Now, not only that, but that intent to kill, when he causes that action that causes the death, that intent to kill, it has to be formed before he actually does the action. It's got to be premeditated, and that's the third element. It's got to be formed beforehand, premeditated. And not only that, but there must have been time for the defendant to subject this premeditated intent to kill to a second look. He's got to be thinking about it. He's got to have deliberated on it. And that's the fourth element. Now, those are the 4 elements of first-degree premeditated murder. And this, I have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but that's all I have to prove. And that is first-degree premeditated murder. He caused the death. At the time he caused, he intended to kill. The intent was formed beforehand. It was premeditated, and he had a chance to look at it a second time to deliberate on it. Those are the 4 elements of first-degree murder. Now, we also have the second kind of first-degree murder, and that's a first-degree felony murder. And the elements there are a little different. The first element is the same. He's got to have caused the death. The second element is a little different. In the second element in premeditated murder, he has to have intended to kill. Well, in felony murder, you can either intend to kill, or you can intend to cause great bodily harm, less than death. Or you can have knowingly created a high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or great bodily harm is the likely result. That's the states of mind that you have for felony murder. And the third element of that is that you do that action while you are committing or attempting to commit or helping somebody else commit either robbery, in this case, and or larceny. So those are the elements of felony murder. You can see that that's a little different than first-degree premeditated murder. That's it. Now, robbery and larceny are also defined for you. The court's going to tell you that as for robbery, you have to use force against the victim. In this case, there was force used against Robert Cipriano. When you use the force, you have to then, in the course of a larceny. And those words mean something. The court's going to tell you those words have a special meaning. Now, larceny is, of course, just stealing. All right? But in the course of a larceny means it includes an attempt. In other words, you don't even have to have completed the crime. You don't even have to have gotten anything. As long as you are attempting to do it, you are still in the course of a larceny, and therefore committing a robbery. And finally, the victim has to be present. Robert Cipriano has to be present when these things happen. That's what a robbery is. That's the felony that we are alleging they were in the course of committing when they caused the death of Mr. Cipriano with either the intent to kill, to do great bodily harm, or to create a high risk of either one of those things. That's felony murder. Also, larceny. Larceny is simply stealing. You took somebody's property, you didn't have consent to take it, you moved the property, you had the intent to permanently deprive the person. Now that's larceny. And again, it can be simply an attempt. You don't even have to make off with anything. You can have been stopped. You can have been interrupted. And you've still committed the felony for purposes of felony murder. Now, you're going to be instructed during the course of this, when we're done with Judge Peterson's instructions. And for both the counts of first-degree premeditated murder and first-degree felony murder, you're going to be given an alternative count, a lesser crime to consider. That's called second-degree murder. Now, this is going to look familiar to you. The first element of that is that the defendant caused the death. And the second element is that either he had the intent to kill, or he had the intent to cause great bodily harm, or he created a high risk of death or great bodily harm, knowing that death or great bodily harm was the likely result. That's the same as for felony. Okay? But there is no other element here. It's just that. You don't have to be committing a felony while you're doing this. That's why this is second degree murder. So for both counts 1 and 2, you're going to be instructed on this, and you're going to be allowed to consider this. If you don't think you did the first degree murder, you can look at the second degree murder and see if you did that. Okay. Let's talk about the next count. Now, there are 2 counts of assault and intent to murder. And this is a pretty easy crime to remember. First of all, you have to have tried to physically injure someone. And you've seen the evidence. We're going to talk about that, but you've seen the evidence. And you know what this man did with his partner. Tried to physically injure. At the time you tried to physically injure, you had the ability to injure. And the third element is simply that while you're doing all this, you had the intent to kill. Now, you're also going to be given a lesser crime to consider as to these 2 counts. These 2 counts of assault and murder. It's called assault with intent to do great bodily harm. The first 2 elements are the same. The third element, instead of intending to kill, you simply have to intend to do great bodily harm, less than that. And I would submit to you right now, as you've seen from the evidence, that they intended to do at least great bodily harm, but they did so much more than that. That's assault with intent to commit murder. That's it. And finally, there's the armed robbery count. Now, the armed robbery is that there was force and violence used against purpose of death, just like robbery. Remember, we talked about that before. Secondly, that it was in the course of a larceny. Remember, larceny is stealing, and in the course of includes attempt. You don't even have to complete the crime. And Robert Cipriano was present. Same as before. But now, you have to have used an object which was capable of causing death or serious injury. An object that was capable of causing death or serious injury. Like a bat. 2 bats. Maybe some nuts. And finally, there has to have been an aggravated assault or serious injury. You saw the injuries in this case. And there is no doubt, not a reasonable doubt or otherwise, that this was a serious and aggravated injury. All 3 of these people suffered. So those are the elements of armed robbery. So those are the crimes. Premeditated murder, felony murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to commit murder, and armed robbery. But if you think about this case, you can see how those elements arise, because you know the facts. So the evidence has to show you these things. Now, what is the evidence? What was the evidence? The first witness in our trial was Dorothy Russell. Remember, she was the 911 operator? And we introduced to her the 911 call. You have that transcript. And one of the things that you hear Tanner Cipriano, remember Tanner? Tanner's in his bedroom, and he's listening to this happen. And you can listen to that disc. That disc is an evidence. You can listen to it again. You can read the transcript. And one of the things he says is this: my brother and his friend have bats, and they're beating my parents with bats. That's one of the things he says. Now, he's right there on April the 16th, and that's about 2:45 in the morning. And he's saying that on the phone to the 911, to Dorothy Russell. My brother and his friend have bats, and they're beating my parents. They're acting in concert. They are aiding and abetting each other. They are helping each other. They're giving assistance. The court will tell you, there's no minimal amount of assistance. You can do it in any way. Just your presence with the intent to lend support to the person. It's like if there's mutual reassurance just by 2 people being together, ganging up on somebody else. That's aiding and abetting. But there's more than that happening here. Let's talk, first of all, about what happened to Robert Cipriano. You heard this morning from Dr. Ortiz-Reyes. He's the medical examiner. I'm going to show you this one time, and I'm not going to show you again, I promise. But we know that Bob Cipriano died of multiple blunt force head trauma. You saw that. And now, unfortunately, you know what it looks like when a man gets hit in the face with a bat. That's what it looks like. And you saw those wounds, all of them. That was his opinion. This man died of multiple blunt force head injury. And remember, he told you that the mechanism of death, he inhaled blood, he drowned in his own blood. Blood that was leaking down through the cracks of his skull. Now, the bats that were used, remember, we had that, I showed you that at the diagram of the house. And you remember Nicole Christensen on that morning, she came with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, the crime investigation team, crime scene investigation team. And she was the head of it. And they were looking through the house. And she looked at that area right there. Remember the staircase? That was the staircase that was leading down into the basement. And she said that she saw those people lying there. Or not her, the officer that first came. They saw Sal lying this way, was the green figure, and they saw Rose propped up against that railing. And when Nicole Christensen comes later, those bodies have now been removed. They were taken to the hospital. It wasn't Sal. You know that. But she looks underneath them, or where they were. And what she sees is this. She sees two bats there. She sees that bat, which is we now know as the eastern bat. And the second bat she sees, we now know is the quest bat. And she collects those pieces of evidence. Okay? And those pieces of evidence are turned over to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab at Northfield. Remember, there they are examined by Andrea Young, whom you heard from yesterday. They were examined for DNA. Andrea Young examined that bat, that eastern bat. And what she found was that Robert Cipriano's DNA, his blood, as you can see plainly, that blood, was on that bat. She saw that, and we know that he was there. I mean, he was covered in blood, and that bat was covered in blood. She also said that Tucker Cipriano is excluded from that bat. His DNA was not on that bat. There was no trace of Tucker Cipriano on that bat. Andrea Young further testified that she also examined the other bat, the quest bat, which we now know was brought into the fray by Isabella, who was trying to defend her family. And she said that Robert Cipriano was excluded from the quest bat. He was not on there. He was on the eastern, but not on this one. And she said that Mitchell Young was not on there either. Now, we also know that there was a BB gun that was cracked off. The stock was cracked off, and that was found right there, right at the feet of Bob Cipriano. And there, as you know, as you can see from this, there was a little puddle of blood right there. The gun was actually lying in the puddle of blood. Now, Bob's DNA was found on the gun. Well, no small wonder that it was found. That it was lying right in his blood. But we have some reason to believe that that was not used in the assault upon Bob. Now, we know that Officers Buckberry and Meister, they were the first two officers on the scene. When they were looking through the house, remember, they went upstairs, and they went to Sal's room, remember? And they found this gun case. Remember, when they saw that, they immediately announced it, because everybody's concerned about the fact that there's a gun. All the police officers are there. If there's a gun case, it's out, it's missing. Was there ever reason to believe that that BB gun was from that gun case? It came from upstairs. And as you recall, Officer Webb, we'll get talking to him in just a second, but he talked to Mitchell Young. And Mitchell Young, remember, said that after the assault of Bob in the kitchen, after the assault of Rose in the kitchen, that this little girl came downstairs and that Tucker took her back upstairs. And that he heard fighting going on up there. And the next thing he knew is that Tucker ran down and some other guy ran down. And we know now that that was Sal. And that BB gun somehow makes it downstairs. And we know from Andrea Young's testimony that Sal's DNA, Sal's blood, was found on that BB gun. So So was Bob here with that BB gun? It's not likely that that BB gun was even down there. It wasn't at the time that Bob was assaulted. His blood is on there, but it's on there because it's lying in a pool of his blood. So what can we conclude from this? Bob's blood is found on the Easton bat, not on the Quest bat. The BB gun is on the BB gun, but there's a good explanation for why that happens. What we can conclude is that Easton bat is the murder one. That's the murder one. Now we know that Andrea Young, she further looked into that Easton bat. She did some more analysis. And what she found was that there was some DNA on the handle of this bat. And what she found was that Mitchell Young could not be excluded as a donor of that DNA, and the DNA is on the handle. He could not be excluded. She could exclude everybody else except for Mitchell. His DNA, she said, is possibly on that bat, on the handle of the bat, not on the barrel, on the handle of the bat, the part you hold the bat with. She further testified that she looked at some clothing. She looked at Mitchell Young's pants. Now, you saw those pants here in court. Saw them a couple times. When Mitchell Young is taken into custody at the hospital, remember, Officer Hirschfeld said that his clothes were cut off and they were taken and put in bags. He took them over to the Farmington Hills PD. And these are the clothes. Remember? And Hirschfeld said that as he was sitting there, looking at Mitchell Young, as Mitchell Young was lying in the bed, he noticed a lot of blood on the pants, on the pant legs. Well, there it is. And you saw it up close, too. And Andrea Young, when she analyzed that blood for DNA, she found that Robert Cipriano's blood was on Lieutenant Young's pants. That's Bob Cipriano's blood. But we know even more about that blood than just that it's Bob Cipriano's. We know that close to Bob's head, when he was lying there in the kitchen, right across from Bob's head, on this cabinet, and it was very low down, remember it was a lower cabinet, just a couple of feet off, or a couple inches off the ground, and right across from him, there was this blood spatter. And remember Bridget Lockhart? She testified again yesterday from the Sheriff's Department. She's the blood spatter expert. She looked at that blood spatter on that cabinet, and she defined what it was. She said that's a certain kind of spatter. It's called impact spatter. Impact, because it's close to the source of blood when the source is being struck. When the source is being struck. That's impact spatter. And she said that's based on several things. First of all, on the size of the droplets, remember? Some are small, they get bigger as they get away. The shape of them, they're round, right where the initial impact is, and then as it gets further and further away, they get more elliptical, remember? Because there's little tails on them, because you're getting away from where the initial impact is from. And what this is, and then the distribution, it's a heavier distribution. It's heavy, because that's where the initial source comes from. It's where the initial splash comes. It's not a splash, it's a spatter. And she also said the amount of the blood is indicative of impact spatter. So that's what that is right there, impact spatter. And the height of the spatter is consistent with Bob being on the floor when that spatter appears. It's consistent with him lying right where he is, just several inches away. Now she also noticed that on the ceiling right above Bob, there was something that she called cast-off, remember? That's these things, and she said that when an object is being hit into blood or any other kind of liquid, and you raise it up, it throws off droplets. And there's a characteristic pattern of those droplets when they hit. Well, that right there, that's called cast-off. And it's right above Bob's Cipriano. And it's consistent with somebody striking once in the back with some kind of club. Hitting him, moving back, throw off, hitting him, impact spatter onto that cabinet just a few inches away. So she's able, by putting these things together, you're getting a clear idea of how this happens. Somebody's standing there over him, hitting him with this Easton bat, causing that impact spatter just a few inches away. When they raise up, the cast off is coming up overhead. It all fits. Now she looked at those clothes too, those pants. Those are Mitchell Young's pants, the ones that Andrew Young said had Bob's blood on them. And when she looked at them, she compared them to the same pattern that was made on that cat. Remember? And she said, that's the same thing. It's the same kind of pattern. It's impact spatter on those pants, on the front of Mitchell Young's pants. And that's Bob's blood, impact spatter. And she said what that means is that he was standing within inches of the source of blood. And we know now the source of blood that was coming was Bob's head. And she said that not only that, but that impact spatter is not just at the very bottoms of his cuffs. It goes up the inseam. Remember, she said it goes up 18 inches. And she said that indicates that he's standing like above the source. He's very, very close. Very, very close. We also know that when Bob's body is found, it's lying in a very strange position. And people don't fall like that. He's got one arm behind his back and the other arm is sort of twisted around. The left arm, like it had been behind his back. People don't fall like that. That's kind of indicative. That looks like someone held on from behind. And there's good reason to believe that that person was Tucker Cipriano. Tucker Cipriano held Bob from behind. While the bat was applied. And what we can say is that bat, the murder weapon, has got Bob's DNA on it. Tucker's excluded from it. But Mitchell Young cannot be excluded from it. We also know that it's low impact spatter, consistent with Bob lying exactly where he's from. There's overhead cast off. And Bob is on defendant Young's pants, and that's impact spatter. All that fits together. He's standing within inches. He's standing over Bob. The conclusion is that defendant Young is beating Bob Cipriano with the bat. Not only that, he was aiding and abetting. He was aiding and abetting Tucker Cipriano, and Tucker Cipriano was aiding and abetting him. But we know, while he was aiding and abetting Tucker Cipriano, it's Mitchell Young who's the killer. And we know that from the evidence. Mitchell Young talked to Detective Webby, remember, at the hospital? And he told Detective Webby, he came to steal money and personal belongings. Anything you can carry or use, he came to steal. That's a larceny. And if you use force during the course of a larceny, it's a robbery. So he tells Detective Webby that. Let's talk about the murder of Robert Cipriano in terms of the elements of the crimes. First of all, premeditated murder. First of all, we know now Mitchell Young caused the death of Robert Cipriano. He not only aided and abetted in causing the death, he caused the death. The evidence shows you he did. He had the intent to kill. You can see from the location of the blows, from the number of blows, from the severity of the blows. And the court will tell you that when you're looking at somebody's intent, you can look at things like this to determine what their intent is, how they do something, whether they use weapons. And he's got a bat. All of that tells you about what his intent is. Those blows are aimed at one of the most vital spots in the body, the head. They are strong impacts. He opens the skull. You saw the pictures. There's a number of them. There are multiple blows, all to the head. One of those blows cracks his skull from ear to ear across the back, like a company. They're very severe blows, and he's using a bat. So, what's his intent? Obviously, his intent is to kill. His intent is to kill. It's not simply to cause great bodily harm. His intent is to kill. Now, that intent has to be premeditated. And in the premeditation, we've heard some testimony about the fact that there was planning here. There was planning here. Remember Ian Zinderman? Talked a few days ago. Well, we're going to talk at great length about Ian Zinderman and why the evidence shows you should believe what he said. But there was planning. This intent to kill was formed ahead of time. It was premeditated. And during the course of that planning, you'll see, if you recall, that the planning was far enough in advance that there was plenty of time to take a second look. There was substantial time for a second look. And that's what deliberation is. And those are the elements of first-degree premeditated murder. We'll talk about these elements in just a second. But these, I think you can see those plainly. Let's talk about the murder of Robert Cipriano in terms of the elements of first-degree felony murder. Again, we know Mitchell Young causes death. He is the killer. He is the man that rendered the blows that killed Bob Cipriano. Again, we know his intent was not to just do great bodily harm or to create a high risk of great bodily harm. His intent was to kill. We know that for the same reason. The location of blows, the number of blows, severity of blows, and the fact that he used a baseball bat to do it. That's the intent. And while he was committing, attempting, or helping to commit a robbery and a larceny, he told women they were in the middle of breaking in to steal. They wanted to steal personal objects, anything they could carry away with. He admits that. Those are the elements of first-degree murder, and those have been satisfied by everything you've seen so far. He committed first-degree felony murder. He committed first-degree. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. It's beyond a doubt. Came to steal, used force, and the only reason why they stopped is because they were interrupted. They were interrupted by a guy that was keeping his head even though he was scared out of his mind, Tanner, who was calling the police, and had a little girl, brave little girl, who opened the door. And a police force that responded exactly the way it should have, within minutes. That's the only reason why he stopped. Let's talk for a second about what happened with Rose Cipriano. Remember, what happens to Rose and Sal is what we charge assault with intent to commit murder. That's why we charge that. So let's look at what happened to Rose. Remember, Sergeant Levy, again, he talked to Mitchell Young, and Mitchell Young said that he actually hit Rose in the head 1 or 2 times with the bat. Hit her 1 or 2 times with the bat. He admits that. He admits that. 1 or 2 times. But we know from Dr. McDowell's testimony, he was the emergency room doctor, that he was there on call when Rose and Sal and Mitchell Young came into the ER at Botsford. And he said that Rose had multiple depressed comminuted skull fractures. Every time she got hit, it forced her skull into her brain. It shattered her skull and forced the fragments into her brain. That's what a depressed comminuted skull fracture is. And there was not just one, there were multiple, he said. There were multiple depressed comminuted skull fractures. That's the evidence. He said these are life-threatening injuries. Life-threatening. He said that this is a priority, I think it was, he said 4, that means without immediate medical intervention, that person will die. I guess that just goes to show you, too, how important that phone call was from Tanner and how important that quick response was from the police. Had they been left on that scene any longer, they would have did the same thing, they would have done the same thing that Robert Cipriano did. He would have bled out. They would have inhaled their own blood. We know Sal was already doing that. Remember, when Bonnie Unruh got in there, Sergeant Unruh, she could hear him gurgling and snoring. She had to lift him up, and he spit out all that blood. Remember? He was breathing in his own blood. He was about to do the same thing that Bob Cipriano did. He was on his way out. Remember, McDowell told us, Dr. McDowell, he said that they do this Glasgow coma scale, the GCS. It's an assessment of how well you are neurologically. And he said that 15 is the perfect score, and 2 is dead. And remember, he said that her Glasgow coma scale was 7. She was halfway, more than halfway on her road into the grave. That was life-threatening, those images. That was not great bodily harm. That was an attempt to kill. Now, we also know about that bat, and Andrea Young from the Michigan State Police told us, again, that bat, that Easton bat, that's got DNA that cannot be eliminated. He cannot be eliminated as the donor of that DNA on the handle of that bat. But we also know, she said that she found Rosemary's DNA also on the handle of that bat. She further said that she examined a sweatshirt. Remember that sweatshirt from Mitchell Young? We showed her that picture and said, yeah, that's a sweatshirt. And she said that Rose's DNA, or blood, was on that sweatshirt. She also talked about looking at the Quest bat. She said she looked at the blood on the Quest bat. And when she did that, she also looked at Tucker's blue jeans. He was arrested. They ended up going to jail and taking his blue jeans. She also looked at blood that was found on his boot. Remember, this was at Sam Chick's house when they discovered the 2 boots. Took them over to MSP. This is one of them. She looked at those objects: the Quest bat, his jeans, and that shoe. And what she found was that Rosemary was on that Quest bat, on those shoes, on that shirt, which means that she was beaten with 2 bats, with the Easton bat, where the blood was found, and with the Quest bat. So these people were working together. Now let's look at what happened to her in terms of the elements. They tried to physically injure her. Yes. They had the ability to injure her. Well, yes, they had the ability to injure her. And they certainly did. And not only that, but at the time, they intended to kill her. And again, you can tell what their intent is by how they do something, the manner in which they do it, where the blows are, how many of them are, the severity of it, how they're inflicted with a bat. Those elements are made. And again, aiding and abetting. The crime was committed. There was assistance before and during. We know that both of them had her blood on them. Both of them were associated with, her blood was on both bats. We know that Mitchell Young was connected up to that Easton bat. Tucker on either bat. But she was beaten with both bats. And that as that aid was given, there was either intent to commit the crime or knowing that the person you're aiding is intending to commit the crime. Well, they were both intending to commit that crime. And we're going to talk about this, but that's exactly the plan. Remember that plan that Ian talked about? We'll talk at length about that. But remember, he said that what was Mitchell's assignment? Mitchell's assignment was to kill the parents. Right? That was what his assignment was when they talked about that at the gas pump. His assignment was to kill mom and dad. And the evidence shows that that's exactly what he was trying to do. He did kill one, and he was trying to kill the other. That was the plan. Remember? And Tucker was supposed to kill Rose. Right? So the summary is that you got both those guys beating her with bats, just like Tanner says in the 911. They're beating my parents with bats. We know that Mitchell Young's got some blood on him. We know that Tucker's Rihanna's got blood on his shoes, on his blue jeans. Now let's look at self-Tucker. They were acting together. That's what all that evidence shows. They were acting together. They were both doing this. They were trying to execute that plan. That is assault murder. Assault with intent to commit murder. Now let's look at Sal. What happened to him? Dr. McDowell, he was the one that received them in the emergency room, and he testified that there were multiple depressed common skull fractures in Sal's head. Same as Rose. Same as Rose. And you saw pictures. There's more pictures. There were more wounds on the other side of his head. He had fractures of his facial bone, so did Rose. And Rose had other fractures, one of which was here. But he was beaten up within an inch of his life. Remember, Dr. McDowell says, okay, Glasgow coma scale 15 is normal, 2 is dead. Remember his Glasgow coma scale? 3. He was on death's door. His eyes were bulged. He was almost dead. But for the fact that there was, this phone call and intervention, he might have 2 homicides. Was there intent to kill? Quite obviously. Quite obviously. Beyond a reasonable doubt? Certainly. The doctor said this life-threatening injuries. Life-threatening injuries. Now, we'll see, back to Andrea Young at the crime lab, again, looking at that same back, recent back. And what she said is that she found Sal's image on that back. That blood was Sal's. And we know, she already testified, that she cannot eliminate him, Mr. Young, as contributing to the DNA on the handle of the back, where you'd hold it to strike something. And Sal is on the other end. We also remember Mark Rash, Officer Rash. He went over to Botsford and he took some swabs off of Mitchell Young's hands. Remember? Mitchell Young's hands were covered with blood. Talk about catching someone red-handed. His hands were covered with blood. You can see that. And Officer Rash took swabs from there. Again, Andrea Young at the lab in Northville, she looked at it and she said, that blood on Mitchell Young's hand is Sal's. It matches Sal's DNA profile. It's it. Who else was in the house? It's Sal's blood. All over Mitchell Young's hands. But there's even more than that. You remember when Officer Buckberry and Officer Meister, when they got there, they started looking through the rooms. Remember, we took a tour of the house? And when they were up in the master bedroom, this is Bob and Rose's the master bedroom. They saw next to the bed this glove. Remember, it was a pair of latex gloves. Looked like they were bloodstained. Later on, Nicole Christensen comes in with the crime scene investigation team from the sheriff's office, and she picked that up. She picked up that pair of gloves. And of course, that was taken over to Andrea Young. And Andrea Young testified to this. She said that she found Mr. Young's DNA, his blood, on the outside, remember? And she found Salvatore's blood on the inside of the glove. But we also know that these are the kind of gloves that you can kind of peel off. You grab the cuff of the glove and you just peel off, so that as you're peeling it off, the inside of the glove becomes the outside surface, and the outside surface becomes the inside. She said she takes off gloves like that. I think Bridget Locker testified to that too. You know what those are like. And that's when you take them off. And that's why Mitchell Young is on the outside surface, while Salvatore is on the inside surface. But the important part is that those are Mitchell Young's gloves. And we also know that when Buckberry and Meister first got there, remember when they came up to the door and they're shining the light in, and they can see that little girl standing there, and they see somebody run by her from the kitchen, not from upstairs from the basement, but from the kitchen. Somebody runs by her and knocks her over and then runs up the stairs, and we know who that is, because we saw him come down later. That's Mitchell Young. So is it any coincidence that this glove is out there in the master bedroom upstairs? But there's even more than that. Andrea Young, she looked at that quest pad, and again, she saw Salvatore's blood on the quest pad through a DNA analysis. That means Salvatore also, just like Rose, was beaten with 2 bats. She further said that she looked at a shirt. And that shirt, remember, was taken from Keego Harbor. Remember? From the house in Keego Harbor. And we know that Tucker came in to Kilo Harbor. We know that from Ian's testimony, and we know that from Samantha Chick's testimony, that he came in that night. And we now know it's around 3:20. Remember, you saw that text on the cell phone at 3:20, I think it was 3:22, it said, open the side door. Remember, it was to LOL from the holder of the phone. It was Tucker, we know now. He was texting to Samantha Chick, let me in the side door, remember? That's 3:22 a.m. And we know that this is going down starting about 4 to 3. And we know that Tucker Cipriano is not at that scene. He's back in the house. And that shirt, remember, that shirt was at the foot of a coffee table right by the front door. Just like Ian said he saw Tucker take it off and throw it. And Samantha Chick said the same thing. And Detective Webby finds the shirt. They pick it up. They give it to Andrew Young. And Andrew Young finds that Salvatore Cipriano, that's his blood. That's his blood. So let's talk about what happened to Sal in terms of the elements of assault with intent to commit murder. Physically tried to injure Salvatore? Quite obviously. Quite obviously. Did they have that ability? Well, they certainly did. They certainly did. Did they intend to kill him? I think you have to look at the evidence. You have to settle that. You're the one that determines the facts of the case. But when you look at the number of blows, the location, the severity, the fact that they used a bat, there's no other conclusion you can reach but that they intended to kill Salvatore Cipriano. And that, again, was according to the plan that Ian had said. There was also aiding and abetting him. Remember, the crime was committed. There was assistance given by each of the defendants. He was beaten. Sal was beaten with both bats. And they knew, they intended the crime themselves, they intended to kill him themselves, or they knew the other person did too, and they know that because of this plan, because they knew that they had. So, Sal was beaten by both of them with their bats. We know that he was found on Mitchell Young's hands. And we know that he was found on that glove upstairs, which had Mitchell Young on it. And we know that he was found on Salvatore Cipriano's shirt, which was recovered at Cuba. Both of those guys were working out on Sal in the early morning hours of April 16th. That blood is Sal's. So that's the elements of the assault murder. Now, there's a little bit more that goes on here. There are a couple of loose ends that don't seem to fit at first, or day after you think about it for a second. That glove, remember, that glove is right there next to the bed. And if you go on the other side of the bed, you know that glove is right there, right at the foot. And if you look, we know now that that's the master closet. Remember the master bedroom closet? And we know that lying there under one of a little shelf, we know that object right there is that object right there. It's a knife. Remember? Nicole Christensen picked that up, that placard, number 39, that was placed there by her. She found that's in the master bedroom, in the closet, just a few feet away from that glove that's covered with DNA from Michigan. And furthermore, they give it again to Andrea Young at the police crime lab, and she says that she cannot exclude Mitchell Young from the handle of that knife. Is it a stretch to think that he ran upstairs when the police arrived, peeled off those gloves, and then tossed the knife into the closet, hoping that nobody would see it? It looks. Which means that he came with a knife. Now, Ian Zimmerman, he told us that after Tucker gets back to the house in Kego Harbor, remember after this whole thing's happened, and Tucker arrives wearing that bloody shirt, around 8 o'clock in the morning or something. This is just before they're going to get arrested. Remember now, the cops are outside, remember down the block, they got that pickup truck staked out. Remember Mark Mostik's there? He's there with Sergeant Rodriguez. And all around are other members of the Sonic group, remember Sonic and DPU? And they're all looking for this truck, and they found it. And they're sitting there. They're waiting for something to happen around the truck. Well, It's about 8 o'clock, and we know Ian Zinnerman tells us that Tucker tells him that he wants him to get rid of the truck. Remember? He said, drive it over to Ferndale and drop it off. He told Ian that. Ian told us that. And not only that, but he told Ian, remember, what else was in the truck? He said, there's a knife in the truck, and I want you to get rid of that. I want you to throw that away. Remember he told Ian that? Well, Ian never makes it to the truck, remember? Because he's arrested. He and Sam are arrested right at the truck by Mark Mostick and Rodriguez. Mostick was using language that his mother wouldn't be proud of, but maybe she'd be proud of what he was doing. Eventually, that truck is searched by Nicole Christensen at the garage at the Farmingdale PD. And when she does search it, she sees between the cushions, remember? She sees this knife and pulls it out. She sees that knife. Now that's the knife that Tucker was talking about, remember? Find that knife, get it, throw it away. That's what he wanted. So it looks as though Tucker's got a knife, and it looks as though Mitchell's got a knife too. Both of them. That bespeaks an intent to kill. Those are dangerous weapons. Unlike a bat, and there are some things that can be used for peaceful purposes, but you can use them to inflict harm, to inflict death. That can be used as a dangerous weapon. But other things, like a knife, are inherently dangerous. And both of them are carrying it there. So that bespeaks an intent to kill. And if you're carrying a knife with you to the scene of this break-in where you're going to rob, that means that you've thought about it beforehand. It's premeditated. You've had some time, as they were getting older, to deliberate on it, a time to take a second look at their intent to kill. Well, we know that there was more than just that. There was a whole plan involved here. There was a whole plan. There was a plan that bespeaks premeditation and deliberation and armed robbery and larceny. Let's talk about that plan. Ian Zinnerman told us that they were sitting at that pump. Now this is the pump at the mobile station in Silver Lake. This is the time when they go there at 11:41, not 10:41. We learned today it was a mistake. But he's sitting there, and as you're looking through the windshield, there's Mitchell Young at the driver's side, and there's Tucker Cipriano. And Ian's sitting between them over there at the pump in that truck, and they're talking. This is on April the 16th, 2012. This is just early. This is 1 o'clock in the morning, remember? We have the video of this. But when this happens is earlier in the evening. He says that they're at the mobile station. This is around 11:41 now. He says that their plan now has become to kill the Ciprianos. Remember they were talking about which family to kill? Is it going to be the Hodges or the Ciprianos? They're talking about looting the house, stealing the cars. They have to kill the family because they're going to take these big ticket items. Now they're at the pump, and they're talking about that. And then they're going to go to Mexico or Tennessee. That's the plan that Ian tells us about. That's what they're doing. And furthermore, they assign things. Young is going to murder the parents, remember? Tucker's going to murder the brothers. And Young is going to murder Isabel, the 8-year-old girl. That was the plan. Ian told us about that. Now, why should we believe that that happened? He also tells us that 2 weeks before, they were all at Chianti and James. Remember, Chianti and James is the garage where they hang out. And he said that he got pulled aside by Mitchell Young and Tucker. And they're talking about that they want to murder a family. Remember? Zinnerman said that they're going to murder a family. And they're going to steal. Remember, the reason was that Tucker was on probation. He'd been violated. He was going to jail. He knew it. And he wanted to get out of town. And to do that, he's going to have to get some big money. So in order to do that, they're going to have to steal big ticket items, including a car. So that's why they're talking about killing a family. It's not going to come easy. They're going to leave the state. That's what he tells us is happening at James and Chianti. And then, again, he's sitting in the driveway at James and Chianti's between Mitchell Young and Tucker on April the 15th. Remember the evening of April the 15th? And now they're talking about just breaking into the house because they want to steal some money so they can buy spice and gas. Remember? That's what he says. And so they set out now to do that. Now we know, at the time that this is going on, Tucker's carrying his cell phone. And we know that because when Mark Mostick arrested him, he recovered that cell phone. And we know that Detective Mike Flatt, took that cell phone and looked at it and took photographs. He looked at the directory on the phone, and he saw those two names, among others. And we know now that Rodriguez is Mitchell Young, and LOL is Samantha Chick. And we knew that because of those phone numbers. We had gotten those phone numbers, and they can identify who those people were. So on this phone, every time you refer to Rodriguez, it's Mr. Young. Every time it's LOL, it's Samantha Chick. And we know that at 10:38 on Sunday, April the 15th, there was a text from Samantha Chick to Tucker. And that's at 10:38 p.m. Hey, are you guys still coming up here? Remember, that was the plan. And remember, Samantha, her brothers Sebastian, and Keontae had all been picked up from Keontae's house by her mother. Remember, she said they went home. Now, Ian tells us that what they did is from that station, from Keontae and James' house, they drove to the subdivision where the house was. And Mitchell Young was driving his truck, and he pulled to the end of Rose Hill, which is a dead end. And later on, Dennis Burke tells us that's the case. And then he said that he and Tucker got out of the car and went to the house, which is just down the street. It's right there. They broke into that window, remember? Ian boosted Tucker up. Tucker took the screen off. He gets in. Now, at 10:49, there's a text from Rodriguez, from Mitchell Young, to Tucker Cipriano. Call me. It's 10:49. Now, they're supposed to be together. Why? Apparently, they're not together. And I would submit to you that this is a phone call while he's sitting at that dead end. And it's taking a little bit longer than he likes. He wants to know if everything's okay. And we're going to see another message a little bit later. But that's a text to Tucker, because this is the time when that beanie is going down. That's the time when that home invasion is happening. Ian tells us that Tucker went through the window, and when he comes out, he's got those things. And we know that because when he's arrested, when Tucker is arrested by Mark Mostick, he recovers those pieces of property. And that fits exactly with what Ian said. He described what Tucker brought out. That's what it was. It fit the description completely. So Ian says that when they've now done that beanie, they go back to the truck, and from there, he says that they go to the gas station, the Valero gas station on Grand River. Now today, you heard the testimony of Martha Peters, who came in with the records from that credit card that Tucker had stolen. And she said that at 11:03 at that location, that address, at 11:03, an ATM machine, they tried to take some money out of the ATM machine, which is a knife. They go inside, and they're approved for that. And I submit to you that's the spice that they were looking for. Ian said that they bought some cigarillos, too, to roll the spice in. And then at 1 o'clock, 11:10, $1 is approved at the gas pump. We know that was really a $74 pump. Remember, Ian said that when they came out, Mitchell went and pumped the gas. Now, Mr. McCarthy said, well, how do you know he didn't pay for it with his own money? Well, you know now that he did use that card, and it was $74.41. That's what Ms. Peters told us. And that corroborates exactly what Ian is telling us. That corroborates exactly what he's telling us. Now, Nicole Christensen later on searched that truck. That's Mitchell's truck. And she said she found those two receipts, remember? But Mr. McCarthy pointed out that the times on the two receipts differed from the times that Martha Peters had on her records. And we knew that. So Detective Flatt knew that. He went over to her. He said he went over and he bought a pack of gum and got a receipt. And he saw that when he looked at his receipt that those were about 37 minutes slow. Those times are about 37 minutes. If you add 37 minutes after those times, and those things are in evidence, you can look at them later, you get approximately the times that are on the DFC records. These are the receipts, and they were in the truck. Ian is telling the truth. He further said that after they do that, they head up Orchard Lake. And while they're going up Orchard Lake, he says that they're rolling the spice down. He doesn't like spice. And Samantha Chick confirmed that. She said he doesn't smoke spice. He doesn't like it. And while they're going up the road, remember, Tucker takes off his gloves. He gives them to Ian. And Ian puts them in his pocket because Tucker's rolling blunt. And he uses his hands. This is while they're going up the road. They start smoking. He and Mr. Young start smoking the blunt. And we know that's true because when Ian is taken into custody, remember, Detective Mostic said he found a pair of gloves on Ian. That's corroborated. That's another thing he says that's corroborated. Now, while this is going on, while they're driving up Orchard Lake, there's a series of text messages that are going on. This is from LOL. That's Samantha Chick, and it's to Tucker. And she's saying, call me when you get here, because I got to sneak in and don't park on the street. And that is at 11:10. Now that's what Tucker says to her about 8 minutes later. That's from Tucker to Samantha. He's partying. And what did Ian say they were doing in the truck while they're going up north? They're smoking spice. Mitchell Young and Tucker Cipriano are smoking spice, and there he is telling Samantha that they're smoking spice. And the time is 11:18. Now she apparently doesn't know what that means. What do you mean? She sends him a question mark back, and that's at 11:22. And then he texts back to her to explain. And he says, this is to Samantha Chick from Tucker. We got enough spice to last us forever. And that matches what Ian said. That they went to that railroad station, they bought that spice, cost $38, $39. And that's what Tucker's telling her as they're driving up the Orchard Lake Road. And that's at 11:29. She responds to Tucker, awesome sauce. He's 14 years old. And that happens at 11:30. And then, just a few minutes later, 9 minutes later, she texts back to Tucker, where are you? It's 11:39. There's no response. Does he know why? Because Ian tells us they arrived at the gas station. And Martha Peters tells us that there are several transactions at 11:41. This is 2 minutes after the text that came from Samantha Chick, which is unanswered, because they are at the station now. There are those transactions at the station. They're trying to buy something that costs $82.50, and it keeps coming back. It keeps denying the transaction, saying it's suspected fraud. There's 4 of those transactions, all the same. Inside, we're told, inside the station. Now, we tried to get the video of that because we were told, the police were told that this actually was 10:41. Remember? There was a big explanation about that. It's one difference between the switch time and the local time. And Scott Mazeppa explained that the police got they were originally told it was 10:41, and they got that video. And by the time they learned of the problem with the time, when they learned that 11:41 was the real time, they went back. Those videos have been recycled. So we explained to you that's why there is no video from this trip, the 11:41 trip, to the mobile station. But when they're at the pump, Ian is telling us they're sitting at that pump. Now remember, it's 11:41 when those transactions are worked. And he's again sitting between Mitchell and between Tucker. And they start talking. And it's Tucker and Mitchell that are talking. They decided to kill the Ciprianos. This is that plan we talked about. They're going to loot the house. They're going to steal the cars. They're going to go to Mexico or Tennessee. Remember? That's what he says is going on as they're sitting at the pump there now. And he says they start to assign murder assignments. Mitchell is going to kill the parents. Tucker is going to kill the brothers. But then, all of a sudden, Mitchell says, well, I'll kill Isabella. And suddenly, the plans change. Ian told us that Tucker loved his sister. And suddenly, when it becomes clear that they're going to have to kill her too, the plans change. And Ian says that Tucker changes the plan and says, well, let's try one more time. Let's see if we can go back and get money. Remember he said that? It's not going to be murder. Let's go back and get some money. And Ian's testimony is that now they go back down from the mobile station up in Silver Lake. They go back down to the house, the Cipriano house. This time, Mitchell parks in that parking lot at the Ben Marks building. And Tucker and Ian go back to the house, going through the window. That's what Ian tells us. And he says when they come out, they've got this card. But in the meantime, this is another text, and this is coming from Mitchell to Tucker. And he's saying, are you guys okay? On your way back, send a message if something is wrong. Call if you want me to pick you up. And the time of that is 37 minutes after midnight. That's almost an hour after the transaction at the mobile station. Enough time for them to have sat at the pump, as long as Ian said they did, to discuss this plan, and then drive out to the Ciprianos for the next home invasion. That matches what Ian's saying. He's texting him, are you guys, you and Ian, okay? On your way back from the house, send a text if something is wrong. Why would something be wrong? Because they were going to break into the house. This text message is like that other one where he says, call me. This second breaking is going down at 37 minutes after midnight. Ian says, this time, when Tucker comes out of the window, he's got that gift card, remember? And it's got the sticky on it. It says the balance is $265. It's dark. They can't see exactly. All they can see is that number, $265. They think they have $265. What a relief. Now we don't have to kill Isabella. Now we have $265. So what are we going to do with it? Well, we also know that Nicole Christensen, she searched that truck, and she found that card in the truck, remember? She found that card in Mitchell's truck. So we know that that happened. That's exactly what Ian told us. What Ian now says is they get back into the truck, and now they head back. They head back up to Sylvan Lake. They go back to the mobile station. He and Ian and Mitchell. And now we know that it's 1:06 in the morning. Remember, the text from Ian was at Mitchell was at 12:39. Now it's 1:06. It takes about 20 minutes to drive up to the gas station from the Cipriano house. And here is the video. Now this video we have. There's the truck. There's Mitchell. There's Tucker. They're going into the store. And there's that shirt. The one that just a little while later is going to have that bloodstain from Salem. You walk in there, and the Visa record, which we read into the record today, the Visa record from that gift card shows that it's $110. It was a $2.65 purchase, not $265, which was reversed 2 times. They thought they had $265. Apparently, they were trying to buy something, and all they had on the card was $2.65, and so the purchase gets reversed 2 times. They tried twice, and when that doesn't work, they revert to using the DFCU. Remember, Martha Peters said that happens. That transaction goes down at 110, and that's what this video is telling us about. And the records show that there's a transaction at 110. The Visa records show there was a transaction at 110. That fits exactly what Ian said. Exactly. And there, $113.24. Apparently, that's what they were trying to purchase with a card that only had $2.65 on it. That's, I guess, what the purchase was trying to be. But that gets denied too, and the card gets blocked. Now the card is not good anymore. That Visa gift card, $2.65, big deal. Now this card is blocked. They can't use it. Now what? Now what? We don't got no money. Now what? And there they are at they're looking at what appears to be a white card. And that Visa card is a white card. So they go back out to the truck. And when they get back in the truck, remember Ian's still back in the truck, and he said, they're like, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do for it? Are we going to do this or not? Are we going to do this or not? Do what? The plan. The plan. Go and kill. You kill the parents. You kill the siblings. I'll kill Isabella. That's what they're saying. That's what they're talking about right there. And Ian responds to that. He says, if you want to fuck up your life, do it on your own accord. Or drop me off. So what do? It's 1:12. They're leaving the station. At 1:18, Tucker is texting to Keontae. And we know now from Sam Chick's testimony that Keontae is at Sam Chick's house in Eagle Harbor. It's 1:18. 6 minutes after they pull out of the, and you know, Ian tells us, Sam Chick is there. It's 1:18. Remember, Ian says, this is the map of the Kego house. Ian says that they park in that apartment building. Remember Samantha Chick's text earlier? Don't park on the street. She doesn't want Mom to know. And she testified that there was a apartment complex where people would often go when they didn't want her mom to know that they were there. They're not parked in the street, and that's exactly where Ian says they go. That's exactly corroborates what he said. And then he said they leave him in the truck, and Tucker and Mitchell Young walk over to the house on Knowles. That's Samantha Chick's. And when they get there, Samantha and her brother Sebastian and Keontae are all out on the porch. And Samantha Chick says, yeah, that happens. We're out there, and all of a sudden, Tucker and Mitchell Young come up to the house. And they say, we're leaving to get some money. They tell Samantha, she testified to that. We're leaving to get some money. Now that fits with that plan that Ian was just telling us about. And she said it doesn't seem normal. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning, it's after 1. They don't have jobs. Where are you going to go? They don't say. They just leave. They also talked to her about Ian staying there, and apparently she agreed to it. So they go back to the truck, and they wake Ian up. Remember he said he was napping? And he said he walks over to Sam's house. He's supposed to go to the side door. He tries to get in there. Can't get in. Goes to the front door. Keontae lets him. He says he's in there now. And he said that Tucker and Mitchell took off. And that's exactly what Sam said. And where are they going? It's now 2:09. Remember the text that said we're here was 1:18. 1:18. Now it's 2:09. And this is sent from Tucker and Mitchell, who's with him now, to Samantha Chick, because it says, hey, Ian's got to stay at your place till we get back. Hiding. Where are they going? Where are they going? Ian's got to stay there. We know that's exactly what Ian said. He was there. He was staying at the house. That exactly fits what he says. That's 2:09. Now, remember, there was a testimony from this gentleman, Dennis Burke. And he said he was coming home from his girlfriend's house. It's about 2:30 in the morning on April 16th. 2:30. Remember? And he says he pulls into Altadena Road right there. And when he gets there, he says there's 2 men in the road with hoodies. Well, we know now who those 2 men are. He said that as he comes through, they split apart. They both put up their hoodies once his headlights hit them. They both put up their hoodies. Of course, this is very suspicious. It's 2:30 in the morning. And when he goes past them, he sees one of them head off to the right. And we know that off to the right is the Cipriano house. He said he goes home, remember he talked to his mother? And those 2 men in hoodies are headed to the Cipriano house. And where they're going, we now know. And what they're going to do, we now know. They're about to change the lives of these people forever. That's what they're going. And we know now what they did there. There was a felony murder committed by Mitchell Young, premeditated murder. This was planned out. They went there with the intent to kill these people and to steal. It was felony murder. It was premeditated. And then they attacked both Rose and Bob and Sal. And they nearly killed Rose and Sal, and they did kill Bob. And that's felony murder, premeditated murder, and 2 counts of assault murder. And they went there to rob, to steal. And you can attempt it. You don't have to even get it. And they don't. That's what the evidence shows. That's what it shows. It shows each of those elements far beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I'm standing in front of you right now. I'm asking you, you're going to go back and the judge is going to give you instructions and you're going to take those back. You're going to be talking with them. But I submit to you that when you start looking at this evidence really carefully, that it forms a story. It makes up a story. It shows what happened after. And what it shows is that Mitchell Young is guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. He's guilty of felony murder. He's guilty of an assault with intent to commit murder on Rose. He's guilty of an assault with intent to commit murder on Sal. And he's guilty of armed robbery. And I'm submitting to you that's the only verdict you can come back with, and that's the verdict I'm asking you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of Mr. Young, I thank you for the attention you paid. Mr. Springsteen expressed his thanks at the beginning of his closing argument, and I do the same on behalf of Mr. Young. During the course of this trial, and we've been at it for a while, over the course of the last 2 weeks, I have been watching the witnesses and paying attention to what's been going on during the presentation of evidence, but I've also been paying attention to you. And I know, because I have kept an eye on your level of attention, that the 12 of you that are ultimately chosen to deliberate after you are instructed are going to have those requisite tools, the information necessary to be able to go back into the jury room, to deliberate, and to come to a determination of the truth. That's what a trial is. A trial is a search for the truth. And you all are the finders of fact. You're the ones who are going to write the final version of what this story is all about. Everybody is well aware of the fact that this has been a very highly publicized, a very media-intensive case. I told you during the opening statement that I never spent 3 days before in my career as a defense lawyer trying to choose a jury. We've spent, I was counting it up today, over the course of since last Wednesday afternoon, this is the 6th actual day that we've been in court. 2 of those days for presenting the evidence, and 2 of those days have been half days, so last Wednesday and yesterday. So we got about 5 days put into being in court to actually try the case, compared to 3 days to try and pick out the people who could be fair and impartial. And the reason that I bring that up, the reason that's significant, is because you folks are the ones. You're the ones who are going to make the final decision about what the truth actually is here. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's completely different than what Mr. Springsteen is argued to you here very eloquently here this afternoon. And that is that I'm going to be asking you for verdicts of not guilty. And it all goes back to this plan. The plan was the big part of the presentation that we just saw in the end, maybe the last third or so of that presentation, was all revolving around Ian Zinderman, the man who's got immunity for having committed 2 home invasions and being an accessory after the fact. And it's him, and him alone, on whom you can rely for the elements of the plan. It's he who says that 2 weeks before anything happened, any kind of a crime was committed, somewhere around the 1st of April, Mr. Zinderman meets Mitchell Young for the very first time. And he's in the company of Tucker Cipriano. Now, Mr. Zinderman, during the course of his testimony, told us a couple of things about his relationship with Tucker Cipriano. He said, number one, that he was his best friend. He'd known him since middle school. And he met him in a special private school for students with learning difficulties. He explained whatever his learning difficulties were, and he didn't say exactly what it was that was wrong with Tucker, but the fact of the matter was they were both going to this special school as middle school students. And ever since then, he had known him, and he repeatedly described Tucker Cipriano to be his best friend. And the other thing that he said about Tucker Cipriano was that he was scared of him. He was deathly afraid of Tucker Cipriano. Fearful of him. Now, this is his best friend, but he's very, very afraid of him. And now he meets Mitchell Young for the first time, and according to what he says, Mitchell Young and Tucker and he are talking about this plan because Mr. Cipriano's got trouble with the law. He's violated the terms of his probation, and he knows that the punishment for that is to be going to jail. So he's got to do something really quick in order to be able to avoid that problem. He can't stick around town, as Mr. Skrinsky pointed out. He's got to get some money, and he needs big money, and he's got to leave. Well, the only problem with that whole story that Ian Zinderman said, and then he goes on, he says, we're going to kill a family. And this is a brilliant we'll kill a family and then we'll get all their goods and then take off. I mean, I guess that's what the idea is. But somehow or another, this is a way to get enough wherewithal to get to Mexico or wherever that place was that Zinderman claimed Mr. Cipriano picked out for him to go to. So what happens is 2 weeks goes by, or thereabouts, because he's not specific exactly what the date was. But, think about this. Does this make common sense that this fellow over here, Mitchell Young, he's going to sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation to help plan out a murder of a number of people in a family in order to get enough loot to be able to travel to a foreign country and live down there? I've never laid eyes on you before, and now I'm going to take you into my confidence. I'm going to conspire with you to commit a heinous crime. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. If he would have said, me and Tucker were talking, and Tucker told me about his troubles, and he's my lifelong friend and my best buddy, maybe there would be some reason to believe that. But Mitchell Young, he doesn't even know him. And more importantly, Mitchell Young doesn't know Ian Zinderman. Why would he ever take him into his trust? But this is what Zinderman says. And Zinderman is the only person that puts any evidence in this record throughout the whole course of 6 days of presenting the trial that says that there's a plan to kill anyone. Zinderman says that the plan gets resurrected on the 15th of April. So the first thing that goes on, though, with the plan is just, according to Zinderman, is for him to participate in not one but two B&Es. Home invasions, breaking into the Cipriano family home at night. But are they going in there to kill everybody? Are they going in there to take everything they have? No. Tucker Cipriano goes in, he gets a gift, or not a gift card, but a credit card, debit card from the DFCU Financial, and he takes off with that, and they go down, and what are they doing? Are they leaving for Mexico? Are they traveling across the country? Did they go in there and take everything that family had? No. They go down to the local gas station to buy something called spice, some ersatz marijuana, to get high. Well, now it's 2 weeks after we understand that we first are hatching this plan, and they are hatching this plan. Tucker Cipriano's here. He's not planning on going anywhere, and all he's really looking to do is to get high. So they use what they can of that card. They want to get $1 million off the card. They put in a request at the ATM, Tucker does, for $100. So that is not going to get you to Mexico. That's not going to get me alone. It's certainly not going to get me and a friend or two friends. So how's that going to help? And of course, the card is denied. The only thing they get some gasoline. They get $2.11 worth of something, and $36 and some change worth of something else. Goods. We know spice is a part of it. And in that one video, or not video, but screen message, the text messaging between Samantha Chick and Tucker, he says, we got more spice than we'll ever smoke. So she says when they showed up, they just had a little tiny bit, and it was just enough for a couple of joints. But that wasn't what Tucker's attitude toward it was when he was on his way up there. And she says, oh, this is awesome, whatever her response was. But like, this was really something cool. The fact of the matter is, then they go back, Tucker, and Zinderman, and they go into the house again, try and get some more stuff. Now, the only person that tells you that, okay, we're going to do it one more time, we're going to try and get this money, otherwise we're going to kill people, is the guy who's the participant in the second home invasion. Now, true it is, according to him, Mitchell Young is in the neighborhood in the truck, but he's not given Tucker a boost into the house. He's not an active participant in this whatsoever. Then, when they come out and they get the $265 gift card that Tucker finds in the car, apparently, and find out that that's really $2.65. Again, according to Zimmerman, nobody else, he says that this plan is hatched. And then there's these assignments. My client, he's going to kill the mother, the father, and the little sister. And Tucker Cipriano, he's going to kill his two brothers. Well, Zinnerman says that Tucker loves his sister more than anything else in the world. So if I, ask yourself, does this make any sense? If I love somebody more than anything else in the world, is it going to be okay for me that somebody else kill her instead of me doing it myself? Is that how I demonstrate my love for this individual? By saying, all right, I'll tell you what, you take care of killing her, this 8-year-old. It's done nothing to her. It makes no sense. This is what Zinnerman has to say, but he's the only person who says it. Nobody comes in and corroborates his words as far as that goes. Sure, he says we go to the gas station and all that stuff, and there's the receipts. Those things, those are true, but those are innocuous. All that does is detail what happened with the loot that he helped Tucker Cipriano bring out of the Cipriano house earlier in the evening on the night that these heinous crimes were committed. They parked up there. Zinnerman goes to this house, Chick's house. He's going to spend the night there. We know for a fact that Tucker Cipriano and my client, Mitchell Young, go to the Cipriano home. And they enter. How does that happen? And the first thing that I think is interesting, too, that we have to go back on the plan just for a second with Zinnerman is no discussion of weapons. Now, I know what was shown up on the board. There's this knife that's found in the closet in the master bedroom that doesn't say it belongs to Mitchell Young. It just says, the DNA expert just says, we can't exclude him. Well, if you can't include me, that's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a leap that has to be made. And when we talk about how many of those loci on the DNA that we have to look at in order to be able to make a determination about whether you can include somebody, we can say that's a match. It takes quite a few. So it was a little unclear exactly how many it was required just to say, well, I can't exclude them. You just have to have a couple of those, 13 or 14, to say, well, I can't exclude them. But it surely doesn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that knife was brought into that room by Mitchell Young, and Mr. Zinnerman certainly can't tell you that. He doesn't say anything about any knife except that his best friend, of whom he is deadly afraid, gave him some instructions the following morning to go out and to ditch his truck in Ferndale and to throw that knife that was in the pocket of the driver's side into the lake. And we know that the only person on the driver's side, by the time Tucker Cipriano got back to the Chick house, was him. He was the driver. One of the things that you have to stop and think about is, how am I going to believe this guy? How do I put proof, the faith in what he has to say about the plan, the deliberation, the premeditation about this is what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Who's going to kill who? You've got to decide, can I really believe this? And I think one of the things to look at is the fact that the prosecutor's office didn't charge Tucker Cipriano or Mitchell Young with either one of the home invasions. Now, we know from Zinnerman's own testimony that he got immunity for that, and it was a pretty substantial thing getting immunity because each of those is a 20-year felony. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that's as serious of a crime as the ones that Mitchell Young actually was charged with, but the fact of the matter is they're still substantial crimes. But the only person who can tell you that Mitchell Young was involved in the commission of those two B&Es as the driver, the only person who can tell you that Tucker Cipriano was involved in those two B&Es as the guy who goes through the window and brings out the stuff, the cards, is Ian Zinnerman. So those guys didn't get charged with it because the only way they could do that is on his word and his word alone. And when I was a student in either the 8th grade or the 9th grade studying English, one of the things that I learned in reading about characters, either fictional characters or non-fictional characters, is that we find out about characters in 3 ways. What the character does, what the character says, and what other people say about that character. And I submit to you here today that what the prosecutor's office determined regarding those two B&Es, those two home invasions, says volumes about how much faith they've got in Ian Zinderman, really. Now, he's a useful witness to them because he gives that key element of planning, the premeditation, that is essential to make out a case of first-degree premeditated murder. Without his testimony, those four elements put up on the board recently during Mr. Skrinsky's closing argument, one of those is missing. And remember, as the judge has instructed already, and we talked about during the jury selection and in the openings, and she's going to instruct you at the end, you got to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt on all four elements before you can find that Mr. Young has committed the crime of first-degree premeditated murder. That's the significance of Ian Zinderman. That's the kind of scrutiny that you have to apply to what he had to say while he testified. And one of the things, and I told you this in the opening statement, but I'm going to repeat it here today too. And one of the things that you cannot do is you can't engage in any kind of sympathy, feeling sorry for this guy who is a little bit slow by his own testimony, and seems to be, very lucky a year and 2 months after the event happened. He's trying to get his life back together. He told you all last week that he was going to be having dinner with his parents, the same ones who had thrown him out of his home. So, if you think about those things, you might have a little bit of sympathy for it. But you can't allow that to happen when you're using cold-eye calculation in your deliberations about where is the truth. And what do I believe? Beyond reasonable doubt. That's a real tall order. And all that rests exclusively on what Ian Zinderman has to say. But there's a lot more to this case than just that. Because, we've got this other crime. We've got first-degree felony murder. And the whole idea of first-degree felony murder is basically you take those, you have to have a certain intent, and a death has to occur, and you have to have a certain state of mind. But you don't have to, premeditate it or anything like that. You either have the intent to kill, the intent to do great bodily harm, less than murder, or you act knowing that the likely outcome of your actions are either going to lead to death or to great bodily harm. And then committing a felony while that death occurs. That's what makes felony murder. Now, the question is, certainly, there isn't any question about the manner in which these people, Mr. Cipriano was killed, and Sal and Rose were injured. It would be foolish to tell you anything other than that Mr. Cipriano died. The manner of death was homicide, just like the medical examiner testified here earlier today. Those are horrific injuries. There's no question about that. And so that element of the homicide is absolutely made. He's dead, and somebody killed him. It's not some natural means. The question is it Mitchell Young that did that? And the same thing goes when we look at those other two crimes regarding Sal and Rose Cipriano. They suffered horrible injuries. There's no question about that. And somebody, whoever was the actor, hit them more than one time. Multiple blunt force trauma was sustained by each of them, just as Robert Cipriano sustained them. The only difference between he and them is that those blows led to his death, whereas miraculously Rose and Sal did not die. But the question is, for you all to decide, what role, if any, did Mr. Young play in the events that occurred in the Cipriano home in the early morning hours of the 16th of April last year? Now, I submit to you this. He did agree to go into that house, just like he told Detective Webby. He said, went in there to get money, personal property, whatever we could carry. And so he's in with Tucker Cipriano to go back one more time and let's get some stuff. Let's do a better job of this. Let's get something that we can actually turn into some money. We don't talk about going to Mexico or any other business, but they're over there to get something. And I submit to you, there's no evidence in this record that anybody walked in with a weapon. But what we know, because Detective Webby testified to it, and Mitchell Young gave a statement to Detective Webby, when he was allowed into the house, or got entry into the house through that mudroom, which you saw the photo of the house, and it's got the front door right next to the garage door, and you saw on the floor plan of the house, that room runs parallel to the garage. Tucker Cipriano walks in that room, and he picks up a bat. And I submit to you, the bat that he picked up, the question is the Easton bat, and he's got that bat in his hand when he walks in the room. Now, it's his house, and he might not be persona welcome there, but he certainly knows his house, and he knows his family, and he knows what's there. And he knew in his mind, he had it. He just didn't share it with anybody else, that he would arm himself with that. Now, let me see. 47. In talking with Detective Webby about Tucker Cipriano, we learned a couple of things. He, unlike his brothers, he was adopted by his parents. He's older than them by about 2 years. We know from his booking information, he's 5'7", weighs about 150 pounds on the day of his arrest. We know from Detective Webby's testimony regarding Sal that Sal was an excellent baseball player. He also told us that both Sal and Tanner were very fine athletes and students. We know that Tucker Cipriano, no fault to him, not making any negative aspersions about him or trying to cast him in a bad light, but he wasn't an excellent student. He was going to special school. He had learning disabilities of some sort. That's why Ian Zinderman knows him. Well, he went to regular school sometimes too, because Dennis Burke knows him from school. But the fact of the matter is, he is not the athlete like his brother is, or his brothers are, and he's got this bat in his hand. And I would submit to you, if you look up here in this photograph, it was admitted as exhibit number 47, you see at the bottom of the stairs, we know when we get some more close-up photographs, not only do you see all that blood, but you also see those two bats down there. But the reason that I ask you to look at this is that there is more significance in this photograph than just those two bats. And I see up here 3 rows of photographs, and if you look very closely at the exhibit, you can see that in the top 2 rows they go across 4, and in the bottom row it's just 3. But that is a total of 11 team photographs. Baseball players, athletes, 2 17-year-old brothers, 6'1", 170 pounds, in the prime of life. Think there might have been some resentment there? You think there might have been some rage build up? Things are going along just great for Tucker's 2 brothers. Things aren't going so good for him. They're living in a house where they are honored and celebrated. He isn't a part of that family anymore. He's on the outside. He's sore. He's got rage. Mitchell Young doesn't know these people from Adam. He's never laid eyes on these folks. He's never been in that home. He's got no axe to grind. He might be interested in some thievery. I'll grant the prosecution that. But being a thief, going into a house so we can get some money, get some personal property, get some stuff we can carry, is a far cry from committing one murder and assaulting 2 other people with the intent to murder them. That's a huge leap. And there's one bat in this case at that point. It's the Easton bat. And the person who's got it is Tucker. How do we know that? It's because Mr. Young, in his voluntary statement to Detective Webby, tells him, gives him the scene. tells him exactly what it is that was going on when he got inside there. Now, backing up just a little bit, before they enter that door, remember that Dennis Burke? Remember, he's the guy that knows Tucker Cipriano from first grade or pretty early on, and then he went to high school. He drove him to North Farmington High School for a while. He recognizes him. He knows him. He didn't recognize him that night, but as soon as he knew what was going on, he knew it was Tucker Cipriano on the right side. He sees two guys. He says, after seeing Mitchell Young's picture in the paper or wherever it was in media, that the guy on the left was Mitchell Young. But he knows that by the build and by his way of walking and running, because he saw Tucker Cipriano run off to the right toward the Cipriano house. Well, what did Dennis also say? That so and that is, Tucker was wearing a hoodie. You've seen Mitchell Young's hoodie. It's been in evidence. It's been examined. There's been DNA testing done on it. But Tucker Cipriano, he didn't stick around when the police got there. He took off. And so he didn't have a hoodie on. He didn't have perhaps some other clothing on. And he certainly didn't have a lot of blood on his body because he cleaned himself up. In fact, according to Zinderman, he says, looking across the hallway, he saw him using soap and a washcloth with Samantha helping. But the fact of the matter is, we know he used at least one washcloth because police had it. And so there's a totally different situation when you look at what they have in the way of evidence on the clothing and the person of Mitchell Young and what could have been there as far as the person of Tucker Cipriano goes. Because, one of the things that I think should have impressed you during the course of this trial is how meticulously careful the Farmington Hills Police Department and the Oakland County Sheriff's Department were in gathering the evidence in this case in order to keep it pristine, just the way it was when they found it. And, the people who testified gave fairly detailed explanations about how that evidence was gathered and preserved. So when Mitchell Young is taken into custody, all his clothing is taken, and it's examined by the various experts who are given the task of doing that. It's all in a secured situation. On the other hand, what we have with Tucker Cipriano is some contamination by a big way, because he's able to discard clothing, and we know for a fact that he discarded clothing. Because if you believe anything that Dennis Burke said, he was wearing a hoodie, and we don't have a hoodie for him. And we don't really know if the clothes that he was wearing, the pants, for instance, were for sure his pants, that he was actually wearing them. There's some DNA of Rose on those pants, but is that really her blood? When I tried to find those things out from the DNA expert, she testified yesterday that she couldn't tell you if these various samples were blood or were epithelia or some other type of material that produces DNA. So whatever is on those clothing items of Tucker, the pants in particular, where there's some match to Rose there, we don't know if that's actually blood or if that's something that was there from Rose, because those are clothes that belonged to Tucker Cipriano, who used to live in that house. For all we know, that is something that happened, her handling his clothes as a mother taking care of a family may very easily do, or oftentimes do, without it being her blood on her body. Now, may I see number 170? We know that when Tucker Cipriano left the house, he got into this truck, Mitchell Young's truck. And if you look into the bed of this truck, it's like a mobile closet. These are people that characterize themselves as homeless, at least according to Mr. Zinderman. He said that Mitchell Young was, that Tucker Cipriano was. But when you look into the back of that truck, you can see that there's all kinds of clothing. And there's nothing that would have been stopping Tucker Cipriano, not only from washing himself up, but also from changing some of his clothing. and getting rid of some blood-stained pants. You know, one of the big items of evidence that is being used to prosecute Mitchell Young are the pants that he was wearing when he was arrested, and the fact that there's blood there. But if Tucker Cipriano, if he'd been caught in the house, we'd know what pants he was wearing when all this went on. But we don't know that. What's really significant for everything that points that it's Bob Cipriano's blood on Mitchell Young, and therefore he must be the killer, there is this one piece of evidence that is unique to Robert Cipriano. It's his blood. It couldn't be anywhere else. 159, please. And that is the way that Tucker Cipriano got out of the house. This exhibit 159 shows that when the evidence technicians got into the house, the crime scene investigators, they found this blood, they didn't know whose it was, by the back door, by the patio. Now, Mitchell Young's never been over to the Cipriano house. And he didn't, once he was in there, he didn't go anywhere. He didn't leave. The police found him inside. We know that. They did not find Tucker. That's Robert Cipriano's blood up there on that door frame, wall, whichever part of the picture you want to look at. The fact is, the reason that that's there, because, you know, Robert Cipriano wasn't anywhere near where this Florida room is, right next to the patio. He was in the kitchen. And the only way that that blood got there is if somebody carried it. Who would have carried it? Clearly, the person carrying that was Tucker Cipriano as he went out of the house to get to Mitchell Young's truck as he abandoned Mitchell Young and ran off for his own safety. You know, think about this for just a minute. You all have homes. If you've lived in it for very long, you should be able to find your way around the house in the dark without too much trouble. But if you invite me over and you turn the lights off and I'm supposed to find my way around, I'm going to have a pretty hard time doing that. This is just common sense. Well, Mitchell Young had never been in that house before. He doesn't know how to get around or anything like that. Tucker does. So, and you know, with the exception of Salvatore's room having a light on, that's the lighting in the house, according to what the scene was when the police arrived. And so it's all dark. Mitchell Young's got no way. What does he do? The police say that, you know, the officers that come up to the door, Officer Meister and Buckberry, they see him come around, go up the stairs. Well, there's no way that, you know, if you run up the stairs, you're going to get out the door, because the doors are on the ground floor. Maybe he didn't know that. Maybe he didn't care, but the fact of the matter is, Tucker Cipriano sure knew, and he was gone. He had all the opportunity in the world to get rid of evidence, make himself scarce, and make it look a lot better for himself than the way it was that he left things for Mitchell Young. So let's talk a little bit about Mitchell Young. In the house, the police see him run upstairs. They come in. Officer Buckberry says, "Come on down, come on out," and he does. And it's not immediate, but it's within about a minute, the way I remember his testimony. You might have a different recollection. Go with what you remember, but I believe it was, you know, it was not a long period of time. He was engaged with Tanner, who had come out of his bedroom off from the side of the room, or the side of the stairways. His room is right there. He was handcuffing him, and he saw that Tanner's eyes got real big, and then he looked up and he saw that Mitchell Young was coming his way. He took him and he put him on the ground. And he testified how he put him on the floor, and he showed the area where he put him. And he said that it was in an area where there was blood. Now, Mr. Sminsky said that the defendant was caught red-handed. He's got this blood on him. Well, he did have blood on him. There was blood all over the floor. And that blood from Rose Cipriano that's on his hands and Sal Cipriano, those items of blood are on that floor in the foyer. There's a tremendous amount of blood there. Detective Officer Buckberry says he laid him down right there on that floor. Now, I know there's two other witnesses who said something different, but you know, he was right there in the house. He's the first person to have contact with him. He's the one who, he said, put him down. And he was keeping a pretty good eye on him because of the fact that he didn't know exactly how dangerous Mr. Young might be. So there's a very good explanation of why it is that the defendant would have this blood on his hands. Now, that mark over there on that wall, there's one other point about that I want to make too. That is, Tucker Cipriano wearing a pair of gloves too. Remember, he brings gloves to this event. Zinnerman says that those gloves he had were given to him by Tucker Cipriano or stuffed into his pockets. But he's got gloves on, and this would be another reason why he's not going to have anyone's blood on his hands by the time he gets caught. If he hadn't washed it all off with soap and water, he wouldn't need to as far as the hands go because he's got those gloves. In fact, in Mr. Young's statement, he told Detective Webby that Tucker brought gloves and gave him some. No, that's true because Mr. Young's got those gloves. And so, with those things in mind, this raises the question of what is it that Mitchell Young was actually going to do? What was he in for? He was there to do one thing, and that was to get some money, personal property, whatever we can carry. He can go there to kill anybody. He can go there to hurt anybody. They're sneaking into the house. The plan was they're going to sneak back out. But Tucker Cipriano, he's got the bat, and the lights got flipped on. He hit his father. He's the one with the rage. He's the one, and what does Mitchell Young tell Detective Webby? He says, Tucker hit his dad. Because the father says, what are you doing in here? And he started swinging. And then he hit Mitchell Young. And he knocked him down. And he dislocated his jaw when he did that. And Mitchell Young goes to the hospital and gets treated for that. Now, it's not an injury like the ones that were sustained by Robert Cipriano and Rose and Sal, and I don't ever mean to imply that it was. But one of the things that we talked about during the testimony of, I think it was Detective Webby, the defendant trying to minimize some of his participation in this case. And that minimization concept was brought up during the testimony of Detective Webby. Well, I thought I saw a little minimization during the testimony of the people who talked about Mr. Young's injury. No one ever said, hey, I'm going to die. And he never said he had a seizure either when he was in the hospital. But Dr. Davis, who came in, I really had the feeling that she had chosen up teams. I mean, she decided she wanted to be on the side of the good guys. So everything about Mitchell Young basically was he was, a malingerer, even though when I used that term, she said, no, I guess he wasn't. But the fact of the matter is she wanted to minimize anything that was wrong with him. I was sitting up in bed very comfortably. And think about that. Well, how comfortable is a guy going to be in a pair of handcuffs with at least two policemen in the room, knowing that he's in this crime scene, he's got all kinds of trouble legally, but physically he's got an injury. And what does she say? Well, yeah, I guess it could be done by that, but it could have been by a yawn. You could get this ailment that he had to go to the hospital for by a yawn. And remember what the fireman had to say. He was even more disdainful of the defendant and his injury. Well, he was whimpering. And he had a bloody nose. Well, and he didn't think there was anything wrong with him. He said he got hit with a bat. He wanted to put as much distance between the defendant and the fact that he actually rendered some aid to him, as though somehow or another that reflected badly on him, instead of just recognizing and acknowledging the fact that, I got a job to do. This is the guy they said that I had to take care of, but he wanted to make it look like there was nothing wrong with him. Well, the irony of all that is the defendant gets admitted to the trauma service over there at the hospital. He doesn't stay for the rest of his life. He's there for a total of 12 hours or thereabouts. But there was all this talk about pain medication and all that. When we showed Dr. Davis the record, she had to acknowledge that, lo and behold, he got some morphine, but it was a very low dose. Still trying to minimize what was wrong with Mr. Leon. And, he gets a prescription for Vicodin when he walks out the door. So some physician thought that it was an injury that warranted some medication, and it wasn't as though he just made the whole thing up. And Sergeant Untitled, who was the person that was the supervisor on the scene, she talked about the high screech, moan, or cry that was emanating from the defendant. She said it got a little annoying hearing it went on for a long time, but she wanted to see to it that he got some help. Officer Buckberry, he said that the defendant was hysterical, his words. And Officer Meister said he was obviously hurt, his testimony. So this goes to whether or not he got hit with a bat. And I submit to you that there's plenty of evidence in the record, corroborated by other people, and the fact that he had to be treated, that he did get hit with a bat. So now the question is, well, what did he do when he got hit with the bat? Did he hit Rose Cipriano right at that point? And I think what we have here, and this is something I think you have to look at very closely, what we have as far as the defendant's statement to the police is him explaining it to Detective Webby as far as it went until he got to the point where he says, maybe I ought to be asking for legal counsel, and there's a little bit of a back and forth between the two of them because the detective is a conscientious person trying to make sure that he's doing the right thing, and he wants to get it clear from the defendant. Are you asking me to provide you with a lawyer? Are you telling me you want to give a lawyer? And finally, Mr. Young gets clear on that point and says yes. He thinks that's what he ought to do. But in that time that they were talking, the defendant provided him with quite a bit of information. Compare that to how it was with Ian Zinderman. Ian Zinderman provided a lot of information. And when we went through that during cross-examination, a lot of those facts were all, kind of jumbled together to begin with. And the reports that the various detectives wrote about what it was that he had to say. But they sorted it out. They went through step by step with him. There was this one thing where they got information from him about something that happened at the mobile gas station, and they get the tape and they don't see anything that even comes close to that. They go back to him with him, and they figure out, because some stuff doesn't make any sense, they go out and they talk to other people, and they put it all together, and then Zinderman is shown how things actually were, and he realizes that I made some mistakes. I was excited. I asked him questions about that, about his first statements to the police. He says, well, my best friend is just charged with this horrible crime. I was upset. I was confused. So he's given like a second chance to get it all squared away, and he's given a lot of assistance to get it all squared, the story, so that it makes sense. And also, just by coincidence, or no coincidence whatsoever, fits up with some of the other physical evidence that the police are able to gather, and this would be the records from the gas stations and timing on the photographs taken, the still photographs or evidence, things of that nature. They didn't do that with Mr. Young. Mr. Young, what he said, that's just there. And so it's the sequence of events, if you take what's written in the report, what Detective Rumpy testified to, is that, Tucker goes crazy, he hits his dad, he says, what are you doing? The defendant does, and then Tucker hits him and knocks him down, and then gives him the bat and says, you hit my mother. Well, if you look at what the DNA expert talked about, the blood stains on the bat that are included in, or that include Rose, are on the Easton bat. On the softball bat, the Quest bat, not the Easton bat. On the Easton bat, there's blood from Robert Cipriano without question. Rose Cipriano cannot be excluded in one blood mark, but those other blood stains that are on the quest path, she is a match for that. And we know, because of the stipulation to what Isabella would have said about that bat, that she brought that bat in. And she wasn't there in the very beginning. And when Rose came along, whenever that was, before the defendant would have been hitting her with a bat, Mr. Young, that quest bat had to be brought into the fray. And that didn't occur until Isabella came along. It isn't a situation, as Mr. Skrinsky and Detective Webby talked about the defendant's statement, where Mr. Cipriano, Tucker Cipriano, says, if you don't get with the program, then you're going to end up in the same shape he is, and meaning his father being hit with the bat, and the defendant is already been hit once, so that he takes the bat from Tucker and strikes Rose. And then, the discussion was, well, then Tucker was unarmed. The defendant should have just taken the bat and beaten him up with the bat. But that isn't how it happened, because there's two bats. And when Rose gets hit, her blood ends up on the quest bat. And the quest bat's not there in the very beginning, because Isabella brings it into the room. So that means that Tucker is armed. He does have a bat, and it isn't until the quest bat is there, the softball bat that Isabella brings in, that he tells the defendant they hit Rose. And what does the defendant tell Sergeant Webby? Yes. He says, I begged her, be quiet. He asks him, he says, did you hit her? Yeah. 1 or 2 times. Now there's blood on the quest bat. The defendant tells the detective that that's what he did. The people argue that that's minimization. I submit to you that while he's telling them that, he's also telling them, where is Tanner Cipriano? Well, we're over in this parking lot, parked at the Ben Marks parking lot. If that truck is gone, that's my truck over there. My phone is in my truck. This is my phone number. Here is the name of my phone carrier. Where would Tucker be going? Well, he always dreamed about going to Mexico and Tennessee. Now, here's a guy laying in the hospital bed. Maybe he didn't understand the question really clearly. I doubt very seriously he thought this would be a good time to be a smart aleck. But that's what he said to begin with. So Sergeant Webby says, well, if he was going somewhere right now, where would he go? Well, going up to the chick center. Well, where's that? It's up in Kego Harbor. Whereabouts? Well, I don't know the exact address, but this is what the house looks like. There's a parking lot. This is how you get there. Well, you heard all the rest of that. That was accurate information. He was telling them the truth. And Tucker Cipriano was apprehended by, a little bit after 8 o'clock in the morning that day. Because everything, not just some of the things, everything that Mitchell Young told Sergeant Webby about how to find Tucker Cipriano was 100% true. So when you sort back through that statement that he gave voluntarily until he quit talking, but he said enough to hurt himself pretty bad in terms of having to face these charges, have that statement be used as evidence against him. Think about sorting all that out. He didn't just swing at Rose Cipriano while Tucker Cipriano was unarmed. That is not the sequence of events. And we know that quest bat didn't get there until Isabella brought it. That's the evidence. Now, proof beyond a reasonable doubt is based upon, it's a doubt based on reason and common sense. You all possess both things. And it's based on reason and common sense as you look at the evidence or the lack of evidence. Now, I got to tell you that people presented a lot of evidence during the course of this trial. There's no question about that. But there are some areas where there is a lack of evidence. And, on his premeditation and deliberation for these crimes, there's a lack of evidence. There's a lack of evidence in this assault business Did he assault Robert Cipriano? Or did he just happen to be close by? After he got knocked down, was he getting up while Tucker Cipriano was wailing away on his poor father's head? Is that how that blood ended up on his coat, on his pants, on his shirt? Did he do the damage to Rose Cipriano that you see in the testimony of Dr. McDowell and in the photographs that were shown? Did those two blows with the bat, did that cause all that? Or did more happen? And was someone else responsible for that? Rose blood is on Tucker. Sal's blood is on Tucker. Did Mitchell Young do anything to Sal? And did he aid and encourage Tucker Cipriano to do any of these things? His words to Detective Webby is that he was shocked that the defendant, co-defendant, Tucker Cipriano, hit his father with the bat. His words, what he told Sergeant Webby was, what the fuck are you doing? He can't believe that this is going on, and that's when he gets hit. Does that sound like a guy who's aiding and encouraging someone else? Is that somebody who's down for a plan and going and killing a family? Is he in for this? No, because his words are, what are you doing? Why is this happening? And it's all happening in the dark, and there's a lot of confusion. It's like being in a real battle. And he doesn't know where all these people are in this house. And he says that Tucker Cipriano goes upstairs, and then the next thing you know, there's all this fighting going on, and he sees Tucker come downstairs, and Salvatore comes downstairs. And we know, because that gun case was opened up in Salvatore's room, that BB gun used to be in there. That got injected into all of this too, along with the second bat. And we know from looking at the photo after everything is said and done that the BB gun got used not to shoot anybody, but to beat someone. There's Salvatore's DNA on that bat, or on that BB gun, but in the gun barrel ends up over in the kitchen, right at Robert Cipriano's feet. It is a confused, crazy scene that it's very hard to have all sorted out, and very difficult, and perhaps unfair to expect that Mitchell Young would be able to be an accurate historian a few hours after all this happened, to give you in sequence, accurately, minute-by-minute descriptions of exactly what happened. And I submit that just because he wasn't able to give you, or give the Detective Webby all of that immediately, that doesn't mean that he was lying. You're going to get an instruction on something called duress. And it doesn't apply to first-degree murder. It doesn't premeditated or felony. But it does apply to the two charges of assault with intent to murder. And it particularly applies to what Mitchell Young says he did, which is that he assaulted Rose Cipriano 2 times with a bat. And he says in his testimony, in his statement to Detective Webby, that he did that under duress. He was being forced to do it. And you're going to get an instruction which tells you about these things that you have to think about, whether this will actually have application to him. And there's actually 5 factors. I know that Judge Kumar is going to tell you about this, but I just want to comment on these a little bit. One is that the threatening behavior would have made a reasonable person fear death or serious bodily harm. Well, according to Mitchell Young's statement, he got hit in the head with a bat and knocked to the ground. So that's more than threatening behavior. That's something that actually happened to him. And then he's warned that if he doesn't get with the program, then it's going to be worse for him. And so that the defendant was actually afraid of death or serious bodily harm. Well, that's exactly what he said. And would a reasonable person be afraid of that? If you've been hit once, now you're told you've got to do very unsavory task of striking another person with a bat. 3, that the defendant had fear at the time that he acted. Well, certainly, because there's Tucker, also armed with the Easton bat. And 4, the defendant committed the act to avoid the threat and harm. Well, he'd been hit once already. He didn't want to get hit again. And 5, the situation did not arise because of the defendant's fault or negligence. And that's the one that you all are going to have to think about quite a bit, because that is a question of fact for you to decide. The argument that I anticipate is, well, it's the defendant's fault because he's in the house. So anything that happened thereafter is his fault, and he's not entitled to have you consider whether he acted on duress. Because if you find that he acted on duress, then he's not guilty of crime. And so in this particular instance, I submit to you that he is in the house with Tucker Cipriano to steal some things, not to rob him. Now, there's a big difference between being a thief and being a robber. A thief goes behind your back. You probably all had something stolen from you before. And it's very annoying when you make that discovery and you think of whoever it is in the most despicable terms, but they're a thief. They didn't confront you. They snuck up, they took something, and they're gone. That's a lot different than robbery. Robbery, the essence of robbery is confrontation. And, a threatened assault, either armed or unarmed, but that's a robbery. Mitchell Young's not up for a robbery. He's up to just go and sneak in, steal a few things, and leave. So, his presence there in the situation, is that his wrongdoing to come and do a robbery? No. His wrongdoing is just to be a thief. And he certainly isn't there to hurt anybody. Get in, get the stuff, and get out. Be on our way. That's the plan. That's his plan. That's what he thought they were going to do. Until Tucker Cipriano injected a bat into the circumstances, and his father showed up wanting to know what he was doing here, what they were doing. That changed the situation. He didn't go there to assault anybody. So I submit to you, and you'll be the ultimate determiners of this, that the defendant is able to satisfy that fifth element, because he's not creating this. He wasn't there to hurt anybody. All he was there to do was to steal something. And maybe that hurt somebody because they got a little less than what they had before, and I'm not justifying that, but that's a far cry from wanting to confront and assault and injure people. And it's for that reason that I submit to you, when you go back and you deliberate, you consider the charge as it affects Rose Cipriano, that assault murder charge, that you can see that there's a defense here to Mitchell Young, where he acted under duress, and because of that, he's not guilty. I submit to you that he's not aiding and abetting Tucker Cipriano. He's trying to figure out what's going on. And Tucker Cipriano knows what's going on, because he's got a plan. He's got a different plan than that one about just going in, getting money, getting personal property and whatever we can carry. And his plan is that way because of this background that he has, his athletic family. May we see 63, please? This is the bottom of the steps. In this photograph are 2 bats. You've seen this before a few times during the trial, as recently as in Mr. Skrinsky's closing. And right above those bats are the 10 photographs, or 11 photographs that I showed of team pitchers. Right here in this corner, on that garbage bag or grocery bag, whatever it is, piece of plastic, where there's all this blood, that's where Salvatore's head was. Tucked into that corner, his legs going out in this direction, and on top of those bats. I submit to you that it is not a coincidence that Salvatore, who's left by his brother to die in that very spot, was left on top of those 2 bats. Obviously, he had to take those bats down there before he put his body there. His still living body. And he's there on that landing, on top of those bats, right underneath all those team pitchers. Because he's filled with rage. There's okay? Does it make sense? No. But that's his state of mind. And Mitchell Young over here, he doesn't know any of his background. He's known Tucker Cipriano for a month. He doesn't know his family. He's never been in his home. He doesn't know his brothers. He doesn't know anything. But that's what he ended up being roped into. That's the reason all this gore, all this mayhem, all this horror occurred in that home, is because Tucker Cipriano was filled with rage. When you think about, because I don't want to show you again, the horrible pictures of Robert Cipriano, the first thought that would go to your mind after you get done just trying to settle your stomach is what would cause one human being to do that to another? What would cause a son, adopted or not, to do that to his father? What would cause a son, adopted or not, to do what was done to Rose Cipriano? What would cause a brother to do that to another brother? You know, in the little bits of information that we have we've received into evidence during the course of this trial to understand something about the Ciprianos, I picked up on a couple of things that I think are remarkable. Tucker Cipriano had to go to special school. His mother and father sent him to a private place because they cared so much for him. They gave him a big chance. And because of that, it shows, it's just one instance that we know about, that they really cared. And they probably gave him a lot of chances. And he just couldn't measure up, and he ended up out of it. And I'm sure that, as Mitchell Young says, the father's first words in there were, "What in the fuck are you doing? Get the fuck out of my house." He probably was at his wit's end with this young man. And those are probably accurately recounted words that he spoke at that time. And who could blame him? But on the other side of that relationship, that son was so filled with rage, he wanted to kill his father. And he succeeded. Killed his father. Put his brother, as Mr. Strinsky has said a couple times during the course of this trial, at death's doorstep. Horribly injured his mother on that scale that's used by the doctors in the emergency room. Sal is a 3 and 2 is the lowest it can be. Rose is a 7 and 2 is the lowest it can be. Those are pretty substantial injuries. If I don't know you, I don't hate you. How can I? And you know, if this is going to be a B&E where we're going to have to, perhaps, if we encounter somebody, we got to get rid of them, well then let's bring a gun. It's just as deadly, but it's a lot less gory and certainly isn't quite nearly as personal. This was personal. This was rage-filled. It's unconscionable. But Mitchell Young didn't sign up for it. Aiding and abetting is what underscores the whole prosecution of Mitchell Young. All he's in for is a little thievery, not any of these assaults. When you go back into that jury room, 12 of you that deliberated, you got a lot to think over. We've presented a lot of evidence during the course of this trial, and there's a lot here in the way of charges. And each charge, has been said many times during the course of this trial, is made up of elements, and each of those elements have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't envy you this task. I ask you to scrutinize the evidence. You know, it's a horrible crime. Each and every one of those are just bad, bad things. And This trial, as bad as the facts are, is not a referendum on whether we think it's all right to murder people or whether you think as a jury that it's all right to assault people or to rob people. That isn't your task as jurors. The legislature's already spoken in the state. It made these things illegal. I'm the first person to tell you that what those crimes are definitely illegal. But the fact is, your job is a much different task, and that is, did Mitchell Young commit any of them? So when you sit down and you go through those elements, and you think about what it is that you have to rely upon to satisfy the individual elements, like the premeditation element, or is Mitchell Young is he actually acting and encouraging Tucker Cipriano to do these things? I can just as easily stand here, look you right in the eye, and tell you that I'm asking for verdicts of not guilty. The moral crime, he was in the house. There's no question about that. He didn't go over there to murder anybody. He didn't go over there to assault anybody. His plan was to get in and get out and not see anyone. So how can he be a party to what it was that Tucker Cipriano decided to do? And you know, this thing about the deliberation, that element of the crime of first-degree murder. We say, you have to take a second look. You have to have enough time to take a second look and decide whether this is really what you want to do. And the law doesn't say how long that period of time is. That's for you as the jury to decide. But in a split second, I submit to you, when the light went on in that kitchen, in the mind of Tucker Cipriano, all of this changed from being a simple thievery mission to murder and mayhem. In his mind, his second look, that light went on, he saw his dad, that's all the second look he needed, he started swimming. And when he got with his brother, who he planned on killing, if you would believe a word that Ian Zinnerman said, he went right to it. He left him at death's doorstep. He took that second look. He wanted to do these things. Mitchell Young, he didn't want any part of it. That's why he was whimpering, according to the fireman, Sergeant Wecker. That's why he was wailing or screeching or crying out, according to Sergeant Ender. That's why he was hysterical, according to Officer Buckberry. And in the midst of all that, he was obviously injured, according to Officer Meister. You put all that evidence together, you think about whether these elements have been satisfied by a standard of proof that is the highest we have in the law, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You're going to be able to find the defendant, and I'm going to ask you to find him not guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. As an actor, because it sounds as though the people who have it kind of going both ways, he's the guy who's doing all the swinging, according to their theory, but he's also there as an aide on the guy. I submit to you he's neither. Not guilty of first-degree felony murder. He did not intend to kill anybody. He didn't want to see anybody injured. He didn't want to create a great risk of harm or death. And what he went in the house to do, sneak in, grab some property, and leave, does not satisfy that intent element, that state of mind element that is essential to finding first-degree felony murder. So once again, I ask you to find him not guilty of that crime. And we have Rose Cipriano charged with assault with intent to murder. I submit to you that he acted under duress. And because of that, people have the burden of proving to you beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not act under duress, that he's not guilty. Count of assault with the intent to murder, as it affects Salvatore Cipriano, I ask you to find Mr. Young not guilty of that charge. The reason is that he was not aiding and abetting his co-defendant, Tucker Cipriano. He had no intention of having anything like that happen to Tucker Cipriano or to Salvatore Cipriano. And it wasn't until he was stuck in the middle of that mayhem and all that was going on around him and he couldn't stop it that he just happened to be there. One of the parts of the instruction you're going to get on this whole theory of aiding and abetting is called mere presence. There's a specific instruction that says if a person is merely present when all this is happening, then they're not guilty. They have to be actually actively acting to commit these crimes or actively encouraging somebody to commit those crimes to be an aider and abetter. Just the fact that he's there doesn't make him guilty. And then when it goes to final count, armed robbery, I ask you to find the defendant not guilty of armed robbery. He went in there just to steal some stuff and walk away, not to confront anybody. There's a major difference between being a thief and being a robber. And I've explained it to you before. And because of that difference in his intent, he's not guilty of armed robbery. There's one other thing about the crimes of assault with the intent to commit murder. You're going to get an instruction in some other on another less serious crime instruction that is known as assault with the intent to do great bodily harm, less than murder. If you find that the elements of assault with the intent to commit murder have not been satisfied, not by proof beyond a reasonable doubt, the judge will tell you that you can then consider the less serious crime. And I'd ask you to give careful consideration to that. But I believe that you will see also that the intent of Mitchell Young was that he didn't want to harm anyone, and it was never his intention to do so. And as it affects Rose Cipriano, that same defense of duress applies, and he can't be found guilty of it as it affects her, but you'll get the same instruction as to Salvatore. And once again, I'll be asking you to find him not guilty. I thank you for the attention you paid during the course of this trial. Thank you for listening to me this afternoon. I'm going to sit down in about 5 or 10 seconds. One last thing I want to tell you is this. When I sit down, I can't get up again. That may be a great relief to you all, but the reason I say it now is because Mr. Skrinsky will get up again. He's got the burden of proof, so he gets rebutted. And that is a time when he is going to poke as many holes or try to into the argument that I presented to you here this afternoon. I can't get up and argue again, and because he's got the burden, the rules are designed that way, and it's perfectly fine. But I ask you to keep in mind what I've said here and what you anticipate I would have said to argue logically in response to those arguments he'll present here in a few minutes. Thank you very much. On behalf of Mitchell Young, you all promised him that you'd give him a fair shot. That was the question I asked each and every one of you during the jury selection. Please count on us, as I repeat, to be fair. I know that you will be. We anxiously look forward to receiving your verdicts. Thank you very much. Thank you, God.
In order to believe that he was just talking, you have to overlook most of the evidence that was found at the scene and most of the evidence that was found on Mitchell Young. Tucker Cipriano might be full of rage, but Mitchell Young is full of blood, and he's full of Bob Cipriano's blood. One thing I want to start with is this. People don't lie to get themselves into trouble. Ian came forward and he confessed to 2 home invasions, and he did that before he was given immunity. Remember, it was my idea to give him immunity after he had talked to us about everything, after he had confessed to the home invasion. In fact, Levy talked about talking to Mitchell Young, and Mitchell Young starts out by saying, I didn't assault anybody, I didn't touch anybody. And every time he gets confronted with a new piece of information, his story changes. That's how that happened. But Ian came to us, and he talked. And it was after he talked that it was my idea to give him immunity. That's what he said. You don't lie to get yourself into trouble. You don't make up the fact that you're involved in home invasions to get into trouble. He said he fully expected, after he talked to the police, that they were going to arrest him that day. He said they were going to arrest him. He was confessing to 2 felonies. You don't lie to get yourself into trouble. And he, what I'm saying is that that's true, and because of that, look carefully at everything that he says and what is corroborated. Look at what is corroborated. The whole story that he tells is corroborated. It's corroborated by other people's testimony, like Samantha Chick. It's corroborated by physical evidence, like the way the subdivisions are set up, by the fact that those cards are found on Mr. Cipriano, the gift cards found in the truck. I mean, all of that he says is corroborated. All of it. So you don't lie to get yourself into trouble. Now, he said, I committed 2 home invasions. Ian Zinnerman is not afraid to commit a home invasion. He showed you that. He confessed it. He did it. But all of a sudden, when the 3rd home invasion comes up, if they're going back there just to take some possession, just to take some property, why is Ian Zinnerman not going with them a 3rd time? He's not afraid to do a home invasion. Why does he insist on being dropped off that 3rd time if the only reason they're going back is to take a few things? It's because the only reason that they're going back is not to take a few things. The reason they're going back is to execute that plan they're talking about. And that's why he wants to get dropped off. He doesn't want any part of that. He said, if you want to fuck up your life, go ahead, but drop me off. And 8 minutes later, they do. He does not want to go with them because of what they are about to do, because of what they plan to do. That's why he doesn't go with them. And I would suggest to you that they're going there to carry out this plan to kill. Now, I mentioned these knives before, and I'd like to suggest to you that maybe when they got there, they intended to use those knives. They intended to enter quietly, to steal up to the rooms, and to use those knives on the people that they intended on killing. But when they open the door, when they get in, what happens? The dog starts to bark. The dog starts to attack. It wakes everybody up. And Dad appears. And we're talking about the fact that there's bats all over the place. Somebody grabs the bat, and that person is Mitchell Young. And all the evidence I told you about, the blood spatter on him, the DNA, all of that points to the fact that it was him beating on Robert Cipriano. The whole plan falls apart. And that's why the only way he uses the knife is at the end when he tosses it into the master bedroom closet. And Tucker is very adamant to Ian about get rid of that knife, throw that knife away. That's because they had those knives with them. And I suggest to you that maybe that was the original plan, which got broken up by Emmy the dog. And now suddenly they had to do something completely different. And so they did. And speaking of Emmy the dog and biting Tucker, remember Ian testified that when Tucker came back to the house in Keego Harbor, he said that Tucker's pants were ripped. Remember that? And Tucker had evidence of dog biting. Can I have, is it 142? Is it 142? Remember there was a picture of his leg taken by Mark Rash, Officer Rash. This was Tucker at the station. He took a picture of his leg, and look at those pants. They're ripped. They're just like Ian said they were when he walked in wearing them after the murder. Those are the same pants. Those are the same pants he was wearing. That's why Rose Cipriano's DNA is on those pants. He was wearing those pants. The police, they go to the house, they search it. They find the shirt. Remember, he came out bareback, when they brought him out? Because, as Ian said, he took the shirt off. And the cops find it right there by the door where Ian said he dropped it. They find that. They go into Samantha's room, and there are his shoes, which also have Rose's blood. Remember? So they find the shoes, and he's barefoot. Remember? Mostic said he's barefoot. They find the shirt, and remember, Mostic said he had no shirt on. But they don't find any pants. They don't find any other pants. Why not? Because he never took them off, because he's wearing them, those ripped pants. And what's on them? Rose's DNA. And what's not on them? What is not there? Bob's DNA is not there. No impact spatter is there. There's nothing on his pants. Nothing at all, like Mitchell Young. That's because Tucker Cipriano did not beat Bob Cipriano. Mitchell Young. You got his pants, you got the DNA, you got blood spatter, you got impact spatter, you got the cast off. The scenario is practically a photograph. It's practically a photograph. He went there pursuant to that plan. He went there to kill. He took that knife with him, and when he started swinging, when he started beating Bob over and over and over and over, and beating Rose over and over, and beating Sal, he intended to kill. That was the plan. That's what Ian said they were supposed to do. And he's even beating the guy he's assigned to kill. He's even beating the guy that Ian said he assigned himself to kill. That's corroboration. So Tucker may have it. And that's why I said, one of the elements I don't have to prove is whether they're good people or bad people, whether they're enraged people or not. Who knows? He said that Tucker's enraged because he's been turned off by his family. Who knows what a rage this man has about what? That's why I tell you, you don't have to decide that. As a matter of fact, you should not decide that. Don't even try. There's no evidence about that. If you stick to the evidence and you stick to the elements, your job is not that hard. Your job is not that hard at all. And the court's going to tell you, I don't have to show a motive. The motive here was the money, the filthy lucre. That's the motive here. That's the motive. And whether there was some kind of psychological underpinning for the way they did it, that's unknowable. And I don't have to prove it. And don't start looking at that, because if you start with that, you will get lost. And that's not your job. Your job is to look at the evidence and to decide what happened and did what happened break the law. And here's what happened. Mitchell Young beat Robert Cipriano to death. There's physical evidence that shows that. Here is physical evidence. There's lots of physical evidence that shows that. He beat Robert Cipriano to death. After he had helped boost Tucker Cipriano into the window in the garage, after they used his truck to drive there, he's aiding and abetting everything. Everything. And he is just as liable for everything that happens there as though he had committed it himself. He is aiding and abetting on everything. 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 They're going there on a Sunday when the family's there. Everybody's there. It's not like they went there, hoping that they weren't home. It's Sunday night. It's school tomorrow. Everybody's there. They go in. Furious. They're armed. They're armed. And they're there knowing that those people are there because they're going to do something to those people. They're going to kill them, and they're going to take the big ticket items. They're going to steal. That's what there's one bit of blood, and Mr. McCarthy says that's the patio. Now, we don't know for sure if that's where Tucker went out. We don't know that. He speculates that maybe that's where Tucker went out. But here's what I will say to you about that. We showed you that body, the body of Mr. Cipriano lying on he's lying there with his arms behind his back like this. That's not a natural way. He's being held from behind. I suggested to you that Tucker Cipriano was holding him from behind. He's holding him from behind. Why? Because Bob Cipriano was fighting back. He was fighting for his life. That's why he's got that broken thumb. He was trying to block this. He was trying to block it. He's got those scrapes. Suggest to you, he was hitting. He was punching Mitchell Young. You know, Mitchell Young, the guy with the TMJ that can be caused by a yawn. Remember, Doc said it can be caused by a yawn. You can dislocate your jaw just yawning too hard. But you know something? I told you Rosemary has the injuries. You know, she got these really bad head injuries. She also has a fracture. Remember the doctor told us about the fracture? It's called the boxer's fracture. It's like what boxers get. It's in the small finger, the fifth metacarpal. When a boxer punches somebody, you can break that finger. You break it right on that bone. It's called a boxer's fracture. Why did that happen? Rose Cipriano was fighting for her life. Her DNA is on that handle because she was trying to grab that bat away from Mitchell Young. And then she busted him in the chops, broke her finger, and dislocated his poor jaw. And the doc said that can happen. You know now, and you're probably never going to forget what a man looks like when he's hit in the face with a bat. You saw that. You saw the pictures of him in the hospital. Not even close. He looks like somebody that got belted in the mouth by somebody who was fighting for their life. You saw Bob Cipriano's ear exploded, his skull cracked completely around. That's what you look like when you have a fracture. That's what you look like when you're hit in the face with a bat. That's what you look like. Not like him. Because he wasn't hit in the face with a bat. He was not hit in the face with a bat. Every person that saw him, all the treaters, even the police, they all said he did not look. Officer, remember Mike Connolly, Officer Connolly, Officer Hirschfeld, Officer Rash, the attendant for the ambulance that came to look at it. They all said he didn't look like a man hit with a bat. That's what Dr. Davis said. He didn't look like a man hit with a bat because she had just been treating a man who was hit with a bat, and it didn't look. And you saw that. It doesn't look anything like what he said. And he got hit hard enough to get knocked down. Hard enough to get knocked down. You know, when Detective Brevy talked to him, he said, you know, how come you got all that blood on your hand? You saw those pictures that Mark Rash took. He's got all that blood on his hand. And you know, remember what he said? He said, well, that came from when I got knocked down. But wait a minute. Whose blood was that? Andrew Young told us. The blood on his hands, it was all Sal's blood. If he gets knocked down by a blow from a baseball bat in the kitchen, and you saw that bloody mess in the kitchen, he doesn't come up with Sal's blood on his hands. He comes up with Bob's. But it's not Bob's blood. If he falls into blood, he doesn't come up with impact spatter, these little dots on his hands. He comes up with transfer. Remember? Transfer, that's like a smear. That's what Bridget Lockhart tells us. If he falls down, it's transfer. And speaking of transfer, if he gets hit with the same bat that just was beating the heck out of Bob, which is covered with blood, the Easton bat, and then he gets belted in the face with that same bat, some of that blood gets transferred onto his face. Now, what do we know about the blood on his face? Andrew Young said there's no DNA foreign to Mitchell Young on Mitchell Young's face. This story doesn't know yet. explanations about why he's got a TMJ. And Rose's broken finger is probably the best. Fighting for a life. Interestingly, too, that because he doesn't participate in the murder, according to him, he actually told Weber, remember, that he didn't even assault anybody until he gets confronted bit by bit, and then bit by bit his story changes. Not so with Ian. Not so with Ian. He came forward, remember? He approached Mostic. He was supposed to come back. They took him to the PD so he could get some stuff out of the truck. And then he came back and approached Mostic and told Mostic more information. Remember? Mostic said that. He came back voluntarily. Not like with Detective Webb and Mitchell Young. It's like pulling teeth. And it keeps changing. What he's saying to Detective Webby is not true. It's just not true. And you know, this thing about that, you know, when the bat shows up, his story, according to Detective Webby, his own words, his own story. We come in, I boost Tucker up into the window, I boost him up into the window, he opens the door, I come in, the dog attacks. All right, now he said that Tucker grabs the bat, Tucker starts swinging. We know that's not true. That's just not true. That's just not true. Then he says that he's standing there and saying, he runs up to Tucker and says, you know, what are you doing? What are you doing? He knows exactly what he's doing. What are you doing? What are you doing? Pow, pow, across the face, knocked down. Blood on his hands. That's what he says. Then he says, Tucker says to him, no mention about Isabella coming down yet, nothing like that. I mean, that's Isabella. And he says, okay, Tucker says to him after he says, you shut up or you're going to join him. Then he says, Rose comes in the kitchen. His own words. His own words. Rose comes in the kitchen. And she starts making noise. And Tucker leans over to him, gives him the bat, the only bat that's been mentioned in his statement. Read it. Look at your notes. And he says, keep her quiet. Now, Tucker's unarmed, and Mitchell Young's got a bat. Instead of busting Tucker across the head, because he's so freaked out because this happened and he wasn't intending to be there and do this, what does he do? He tries to beat Rose's brains in. Rose. Tucker's not armed anymore. Tucker's not armed anymore. And one thing about that duress instruction that Mr. McCracken was saying, remember, one of the things that the duress instruction requires, he had a fear of death or great about serious harm at the time he acted. So at the time he's hitting Rose, he's got to be in fear of death or serious injury. But he's the only one that's armed. How can that be? Also, the instruction will also say that he must commit the crime to avoid the threatened harm. What threatened harm? He's got the bat. In his own words, by his own admission, he's got the bat. And Isabella has not been down yet, because then he says that after he belts Rose a couple of times with the bat, he says that a little girl comes down the stairs. And that's when Tucker grabs her. Now, possibly that's when the second bat is introduced into the scene. But all this stuff that happened in the kitchen is done. It's done. Bob's dead. He's allegedly been belted in the face. And then he's gone after Rose with the same bat that allegedly belted him in the face, which leaves no DNA behind. And he falls and gets Sal's blood on him. There's no talk about Sal yet. It's Sal's blood. He told Webb, the blood on my hands because when I fell. Sal's blood. It's not Bob's. It's Sal. Then he says, Tucker grabs the girl, takes her upstairs, and he hears commotion going on up there. And that's, I submit to you, that's when the BB gun thing starts happening. Bob's dead. He's gone. And that's when he says Tucker runs down the stairs, he's got another guy, that's Sal. And if anything, that's when the BB gun is coming down. And that's why I said it ends up at Bob's feet and it's got his blood on it because it ends up in the pool of his blood. That's how that happened. That wasn't a reason to assault Bob. But that fits the evidence. When you look at the evidence, that fits the evidence. If you look at the evidence, your job is easy. If you look at the evidence and follow the law, the job is easy. The other thing that the duress instruction requires is that the situation did not arise because of the defendant's fault or negligence. And Mr. McCarthy says, oh, he's going to argue that, the whole thing arose because they were there, wrongfully in the beginning with. Yes, that's exactly right. No wrongful presence, no assault, no murder, no nothing. These people sleep, they wake up on Monday morning just like they expected to do when they went to bed on Sunday night. And he says, they broke in, they went there on purpose, and they're there illegally. They're there to steal. He's not there. By his fault, he's not there. This doesn't ever happen. He's not even entitled to do arrest. Arrest means when somebody just suddenly, threatens you, like, do this to that person or I'm going to beat your head in. And you do it because you're afraid. And there's imminent fear, there's imminent threat. None of that's here. None of that. If you look at those elements of duress, and 3 out of the 5 are just not there. Just not even there. Not even close. And duress is not a defense to murder anyone. So it's not even applicable to those first-degree murder counts at all. If anything, Mr. McCarthy correctly states it's applicable to the assault murder. Let me tell you, there's no duress here. Because he's lying. He's lying about that. And when he's sitting there, when he stops squealing, and he's squealing and making that high-pitched hysterical cry, because he's caught. Because he's caught. And it was even said, he wasn't crying because of his discomfort. He's crying because of the situation. One of the witnesses actually said it was Dan Wecker, who's the ambulance attendant. He's not crying because of his pain. There's no physical manifestation of pain. He's not groaning, he's not moaning, he's not doing anything like that. As a matter of fact, the only time there's a mention of pain is when they said, what's wrong? Well, my jaw hurts. But he's not sitting there writhing, moaning, holding himself. No. None of that. No outward sign of pain. Nothing real. Nothing objective. And the doctors note that too. That's what duress requires. The CT indicates there's no brain injury, not subdural hemorrhaging, not a swelling of the brain, not a herniation of the brain down the foramen magnum, down that hole in the skull. Nothing like that. Nothing like these people have. Nothing like that. He's got a dislocated jaw because Rose busted his finger when she did it. Because she was fighting for her life. Because this guy was trying to kill her. You don't beat somebody in the head just trying to hurt them. You don't keep beating them and beating them and beating them in the head trying to hurt them. That's what happened. It's an ugly, ugly scene. It's an ugly story, and I'm sorry to have to put it on you. But that's what happened. That's what happened. I had to show you that stuff to show you. Their intent is reflected by what they did, what he did. And his intent is the intent to kill all the way. Just like Ian said. Just like he said. Just like he said. Now, obviously, me and Mr. McCarthy, we do not agree about what the evidence shows. We haven't had too many objections. And, of course, the trouble, we do not agree on where they should end up, obviously. We end up on 180-degree different poles. But one thing that we do agree about is what makes our American justice system one of the best. Well, that is this. Anybody, a man or a woman, you or me, or Mr. Young, anybody that comes into a courtroom who's charged with a crime, who's accused of a crime by a prosecutor, that person, all of us, we come with the presumption of innocence. All of us. And we wear that like a protective cloak. We wear it like a protective cloak, the presumption of innocence. We're presumed to be innocent. And it's up to the prosecutor, that's me, to prove otherwise. But that cloak can be removed. That presumption can be overcome. And it can be overcome by the evidence. The evidence. And now, when you look at Mr. Young sitting there, in the light of the evidence, you see that cloak is gone. that presumption is removed. And now he's sitting there in the light of the evidence for exactly what he is. He's guilty, ladies and gentlemen. He's guilty.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to excuse you for the evening and ask you to return tomorrow morning at 8:30. And I will read you your final jury instructions and send the case to you for deliberations. I'll remind you one last time not to read anything, watch anything, listen to anything, discuss anything with anyone about the case. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
Please rise for the jury.